puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. This time we are covering the revenge of the curse of the return of son of sequel 2. Now, there are two Samuels.
And they're going to fight it out to the death.
Oh, see, I liked Samuel as Sir not appearing in this book.
So, why are there two Samuels in this one?
still just the same guy, but he's not around anymore. He died last time.
It's two different deaths.
I'm pretty sure if I knew like pop culture better, there might be like some movie I could compare it to, but I know nothing about pop culture.
If you're using the KJV, you also get two. It come to passes in the first two verses. So it could
Is
be
it not a Septuagint thing?
I think
text?
it waved over from the Book of Mormon or something. I don't know.
Well, no. So the he's talking about the division of the books. Yeah. So the Septuagint does use it uses first through fourth kingdoms, and then the first two books of kingdoms were retitled in English, First and Second Samuel, and then we have First and Second Kings.
Which does, I guess, cover. There's some overlap, but yeah, it's actually, I'm surprised Samuel only got one death.
Yeah, that's true. Because after so many introductions for all the other characters,
even Saul gets like 3. And how many fucking times did Isaac die? Well, like 4 different death scenes in a row.
Well, you could make that into a reference.
Yeah, Isaac, how many times did you die?
All right, So who is reading today?
I think Lawrence.
Yeah, I suppose I can.
Okay.
Read up to and including 16.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So through 16 is what you mean. All right. So after the death of Saul, when David had returned from defeating the Amalekites, David remained 2 days in Ziklag. On the third day, a man came from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dirt on his feet. When he came to David, he fell to the ground.
His feet?
Sorry, and came to David. Sorry, yeah, that was my bad. Torn and dirt on his head. When he came to David, he fell to the ground and did obeisance. I don't even know how I got that, because it looked kind of like fell. David said to him, "Where have you come from?" He said to him, "I have escaped from the camp of Israel." David said to him, "How did things go? Tell me." He answered, "The army fled from the battle, but also many of the army fell and died, and Saul and his son Jonathan also died." Then David asked the young man who was reporting to him, "How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan died?" The young man reporting to him said, "I happened to be on Mount Gilboa, and there was Saul leaning on his spear, while the chariots and the horsemen drew close to him. When he looked behind him, he saw me and called to me, and I answered, 'Here, sir.' And he said to me, 'Who are you?' I answered him, 'I am an Amalekite.' He said to me, 'Come, stand over me and kill me, for convulsions have seized me, and yet my life still lingers.' So I stood over him and killed him, for I knew that he could not live after he had fallen. I took the crown that was on his head and the armlet that was on his arm, and I have brought them here to my lord." Then David took hold of his clothes and tore them, and all the men who were with him did the same. They mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul and for his son Jonathan and for the army of the Lord and for the house of Israel, because they had been struck down by the sword. David said to the young man who had reported to him, "Where do you come from?" He answered, "I am the son of a resident alien, an Amalekite." David said to him, Were you not afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? Then David called one of the young men and said, "Come here and strike him down." So he struck him down and he died. David said to him, "Your blood be on your head, for your own mouth has testified against you, saying, I have killed the Lord's anointed." So yeah, obviously different death scene than the other than the last chapter. So in this one, the apologetic is usually like, well, he's lying here, obviously.
Yeah, that's what most commentators say actually.
For a reward.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that's a lot of cope. So I totally get where they're coming from. However, considering the other stuff we know about Saul and Jonathan and David having many entrances in the book, which I'm sure were also lies for a reward, then I don't know. I just find it unlikely. I would be like, this is part of a different narrative altogether.
Yeah, there's also another explanation where it's like a continuation. So like the last time we see him, he falls upon his sword and to kill himself, but he hasn't died yet. And then he asks the Amalekite to finish him off.
Right.
And the Amalekite is like, he's gonna die anyway. He's fallen on his sword.
Right. Yeah.
So me killing him and finishing him off shouldn't have been a bad thing. Which
it was a mercy killing, and that's where the morality of it becomes problematic, because this kid may have been like, look, I brought his crown for you, but like if Saul is dying and says, kill me quickly before the enemies come here and do horrible things to me while I'm still alive,
it makes sense.
Yeah.
But no, he's the Lord's anointed. You can't harm him, even though he's dying and begging for release. Like, whatever.
That's pretty fucked up.
Okay.
So, and also, he just killed him, without any judicial. What's the word?
I mean, this is like during an attack, right? Like they were in battle, weren't they?
Yeah.
Who?
And he's already dying. He knows
They were
he's
attacked by the
dying.
Philistines.
Yeah. Seems
Yeah,
like
but it was
the
just
normal
a bias.
thing to do. But funny thing about the Bible, it condones murder for all the reasons that aren't good.
Mhm.
Never for when it's the morally right thing to do.
You're right.
I
God is
wonder
always
if-
evil.
I wonder if the story was changed to make him an Amalekite to make people be less sympathetic.
Yeah, I mean,
character.
it is possible, and that's something that some scholars actually note. Like, he's an Amalekite, so you shouldn't really trust what he says. That kind of stuff.
There are other periods of writing that clearly show that the Amalekites were, there's, inciting hatred.
Okay, but if he
against
was
them.
lying and then what did he do wrong? He didn't kill the guy.
Well,
yeah,
he
but-
could have lied. I mean, he could have lied because he wanted to get a reward, right? That's something that like
Okay.
Anderson notes.
At the same time, usually biblical authors they will tell you straight up if someone is lying, because they're they're another narrator. So they'll tell you if someone is
Yeah,
lying,
exactly.
or if someone they'll tell you something wasn't true. This happens often. So the idea that the author wouldn't tell us his outsider's perspective, being like, oh yeah, and he lied, and David foolishly believes him or something. That's another thing. It makes David look stupid for believing in a Amalekite. There you go. So it just seems to serve no actual rhetorical purpose, because in one case,
So
they're making
David
look
is
stupid.
stupid,
Right,
petty, merciless, and cruel, and self-righteous. Man after God's own heart.
Yeah, so I just think it's likely from another story.
We have a comment from Ben One Eye, who offers 25. I guess that's Romanian
Lay. Yeah.
Yes. At least Moses had the decency to die at the end of his last book, not halfway through the first one.
That's funny.
So I guess one of the concepts that this story sort of brings to mind here is how in antiquity, whenever crowns were overtaken, the what was expected of the conquering king or whoever takes place of the previous king is that they kill everybody in that lineage, whoever was on the crown, like the entire family, because you don't want them coming back and retaliating and whatnot. And it just certainly seems like this history is really just trying to drive the point that David was not that. When he took over Saul, not only where it was his
He was
the whole
forced to do
situation that brought
it.
upon
He didn't
Saul's
want
death
to.
completely outside his his purview, but also like the handling of the body, and then also his further on his primary military leader Abner as well. So
You're quite right that that was the norm. But I honestly even find it more suspicious because while it was the norm to, eliminate any lineage claims that might oppose you, it was also the norm to pretend innocence. And damn if he doesn't work hard on that one.
mhm.
Yeah, like the
I would
boys
never.
the
I'm
princes
so
in the tower.
shocked. Oh no, what happened? I am shocked. This is my surprised face. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So we're gonna move on. I don't think anyone's had any more commentary or anything.
Yeah. Well, I have 10 pages for this chapter.
Yeah, I'm sure. We're gonna really get into it for the next part though.
No.
We're gonna have
so, of course the next part, but yeah. So before I start the commentary, I should note that the bibliography didn't really change, although there is only one change, and that is instead of Klein from the for First Samuel, now we have Arnold A. Anderson from Second Samuel, which is from the same series. It's Word Biblical Commentary, but yeah, that's it. That's all the change there is. Okay, so I'll start on verse 2. A man arrived from Saul's camp. According to Rabbi Yitzchak in Pesikta de Rav Kahana 3:16, this was Doeg the Edomite, or the son of Doeg, according to Tanchuma Buver Kitetse 18. This identification, however, is rejected by Rashi. The man identifies himself as an Amalekite, as we see in verse 8 in the Kirei and 13, which is surprising given that Saul had destroyed the Amalekites in 1 Samuel 15, and David was at war against them. Some traditional commentators, like Kara and Kimchion verse 13, explain that the Amalekite was a convert. Anderson notes G.M. Landis's opinion that the Amalekite may have been a mercenary in the Philistine forces. He writes, however, that this seems unlikely, since he recognized not only Saul, but also Jonathan's body. McCarter writes that by identifying the man as an Amalekite, the ancient reader would suspect his version of the story, given that the Amalekites were known for their treachery. As Hertzberg puts it, quote, Amalekites remain Amalekites even if they are sojourning in Israel, end quote. Pseudophilo in LAB 65.4 calls him Edabus, son of Agag. Yeah.
So the son of the last Amalekite king, is that the idea?
Yeah, you could say that.
Wait,
on that
what
same
did you
verse,
call him?
sorry.
Oedipus? What did you call him?
Edabus.
Oedipus. Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So nothing to do with like an Oedipus complex. Okay.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't know where the name comes from.
Yeah.
Okay. On that same verse, clothes torn and dust on his head. These are all signs of mourning, as we see in Genesis 37:34, Joshua 7:5, 1 Samuel 4:12, and 2 Samuel 13:31. McCarter writes that if the Amalekite was lying, then his appearance may have been an attempt to, quote, lend dramatic weight to his story, end quote. On verse 4, the Amalekite's message is reminiscent of the message that was given to Eli by the men of Benjamin after the defeat in the battle at Aphek in 1 Samuel 4:17. David even asks the same question that Eli made. What was the event? In Hebrew, Me haya hadavar in 1 Samuel 4:16. McCarter, commenting on 1 Samuel 4 verses 12 to 17, takes this as, quote, an example of the common use of a literary motif by different writers, who drew upon a common source or a shared repertoire of conventional narrative situations, a familiar feature of biblical prose, end quote. Anderson, however, writes, quote, "The description of similar incidents may well follow a conventional literary pattern. The Amalekites' reply is somewhat reminiscent of the short battle reports," end quote. And Auld comments, and Auld asks, should we compare David and Eli as receivers of the bad news and suppose that at least a slow-burning fuse has been lit under David and his house? Or should we simply contrast the young man of action and of the future with the old man and his daughter-in-law, whose house is already under divine threat? End quote. On verses 6 through 10, there are several discrepancies between the Amalekites' testimony and the events described in 1 Samuel 31. The Amalekites said that Saul leaned on his spear, in Hebrew chanit, but in 1 Samuel 31:4, it tells that Saul fell upon his sword, cherev. Saul does not die immediately in the Amalekites' version, but in 1 Samuel 31:5, Saul died immediately after he fell upon his sword. The Amalekites said that Saul requested to kill him, but in 1 Samuel 31:5, Saul kills himself. Most commentators wrote that the Amalekite was lying in order to gain favor with David. McCarter, for instance, writes, With an Amalekite greed for plunder, he stripes the king's body of its regalia, and perhaps subsequently... Regalia, English. And perhaps subsequently conceived the plan of conveying them to David, hoping thereby to procure the favor of the most powerful man in Judah. In the expectation that it would lend further support to his scheme, he decided to represent himself as the slayer of Saul. But in this respect, he, like the man who subsequently would assassinate Ishbaal, fatally misjudged David. End quote. Some scholars, however, reject this interpretation. Gelsonides wrote, quote, "It could be that Saul did not die when he fell on his sword, and the Amalekite finished him as he said to David." End quote. Bar-Efrat writes that the two stories do not contradict each other, but rather complement each other. He notes that the verb form mutat, which the Amalekite uses twice in verses 9 through 10, means finished to put to death. He compares Saul's death to that of Goliath, who is described as first dying, quote-unquote, by David, vayamitehu, with a stone, but later David kills him, vayametatehu, by the sword. He also argued that it is hard to assume that a person will make up a story about killing the king, and then justify himself for doing so. The fact that he has the king's crown and armlet proved that he was in Gilboa and was close to Saul at the time of his death, or right after it. He notes that several details of the Amalekite story do fit with the version in 1 Samuel 31, such as the description of the Philistines closing in on Saul and Saul's request to be killed. He writes, therefore, quote, "Each of the two versions brings the details that are important to it. The first, which puts the death of Saul and his sons in the center, expounds the telling of Saul's suicide. The second, which is about bringing the news of Saul's death to David and his reaction to it, emphasizes the messenger's contribution to the king's death. The assumption that the Amalekite speaks truthfully creates an ironic contrast between Saul avoiding killing all of Amalek in 1 Samuel 15 and between his death by the Amalekite." End quote.
Oh, right, because there wouldn't be any Amalekites left if he had just gone and killed them all. So he would have not survived and been tortured for longer, but he wouldn't have been killed by that guy.
Also, I mean, while there are like a few things that are the same, even in like some of the introduction stories for like David, for example, some of the things are the same, like the amount of brothers he has or something. Some things are the same, but like they're very clearly different stories or parts of different stories.
I don't know if Tomer mentioned anything, but is it still the case that Ziklag, that place where David stayed those 2 days, that's still not a thing? Like, there's no evidence of that being a place. Is that still?
Is it?
Did they ever find Ziklag?
I can quote from Anderson. He writes, "The location of Ziklag is uncertain, but its identification with Tel El Huwailfe, some 14 miles or 23 kilometers north of Beersheba, has been widely accepted." Anson Reini has argued, however, that a more likely site is Tel El Malicha, some 18 miles or 29 kilometers east of Gaza. Oren has suggested Tel Sharia in the northwestern Negev.
So there's at least 3 options.
And it's
I
just
could say
based
that.
on location, right? It's not. It's nothing. There's nothing physical that tells us that this location is any link to the story.
Well, it was supposed to have some association with the royal house of David unto this day.
Right.
But
I mean-
whatever the fuck that means. But at least in
Yeah.
this case, like it's just supposed to be a small city. So it doesn't have any distinguishing features that like it doesn't have a big monument or a temple or anything that would,
Yeah, and I should note that it is mentioned previously in Joshua 15:31 and 19:5 and 1 Samuel 27:6. I think I've covered Ziklag in 1 Samuel, when it was also assigned
could
to
be
Judah
those-
and to Simeon.
That's always
Yeah.
helpful. Yeah, it could just be all of those 3 sites have like pretty much the same amount of
Speculation.
or physical evidence that ties it to Judah Heights or whatever.
I don't have my my biblical archaeology books with me, so I can't exactly check it right now.
All right.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Okay. On verse 9, for anguish is come upon me, I'm reading the KJV version. Hebrew for anguish is hashavatz, which is a hapax. The exact meaning of the word is unclear. McCarter writes that the verb shin bet tzadik seems to have meant mix, and the meaning of the noun was possibly confusion or dizziness. A reading reflected by Peshitta, which reads dizziness, corresponding probably to the Greek skotodinos, which McCarter restores from the Septuagint skotos deinon, a terrible darkness. Targum reads trembling, and several traditional commentators like Kara Kimchen Ibn Kaspi took Shavat to be a type of sickness, quote, which happens to a person due to a sword blow, end quote, according to Kimchi. Some commentators, however, take Shavat to be a type of garment. Rashi notes that according to Midrash Tanchuma Buver Metzorah 4, Saul said that he died because of the sin of killing the priests of Nob, as it is written concerning them, a checkered shirt, in Hebrew kutonet tashbetz. Gersonides wrote that Saul's armor was studded to add strength to it, in such a way that a sword could not cut it easily. Thus, he said that the armor held his sword in such a way that it couldn't stab him. Ditrani combines both interpretations. Quote, when a person is very frightened, all of his organs wrinkle.
That is news to me.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah. The one about the priests and the shirt is kind of, it's just like, oh, the word for checkered shirt is similar to this word, so he chose this word for I am in agony, whatever, because to allude to the checkered shirts that the priests wore, which is like a bit of a stretch, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The shirts stretch too.
The king is dying. He's like, I'm going to make a pun about how this is a punishment for me.
And what is it about ripping clothes all the time? What are these?
It's a mourning thing.
The sign of mourning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like different cultures had different phrases for mourning. Shirt ripping, putting dirt on your face,
Shaving.
yeah,
Putting on sackcloth,
yeah,
Tattoos.
a whole bunch of them.
ashes on the head.
Tearing your hair.
Yeah.
Other suggestions include Vulgate, which reads anguish, Anderson, who renders the hand of death, I like that, and Josephus in Antiquity 7:3, which reads weakness. I think the throes of death is also the NIV version. NIV and REB, according to Tsumura.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, on verse 10, crown and band. The crown, Nezer, and the band, Etz'adah, are royal insignia. Anderson writes that the crown seems to indicate not only the authority of its wearer, but also the sacred nature of his office, according to Exodus 39:30, 2 Kings 11:12, Psalms 21:4, which is 3 in the Old Testament. McCarter writes that the Nezer was more likely an emblem worn on the forehead, comparable to the uraeus worn on the forehead by the kings of Egypt. Bar-Efrat notes that the great priest also wore a golden nezer, as we see in Exodus 39:30 and Leviticus 8:9. The band, Etz Adah, found also in Numbers 31:50, is generally taken to be an armlet, and possibly similar to the Tze'adah jewelry found in Isaiah 3:20. Anderson notes that the Egyptian and Assyrian rulers are often depicted with ornamented armlets or bracelets on their arms. Targum reads Totafta, which is phylactery. Van Stardine Solman writes that Targum avoids using a neutral word for bracelet, for example, shira, in order to avoid trespassing the commandment that men should not put on women's garments, Deuteronomy 22:5. Thus, Saul is depicted as a faithful Jew wearing his phylacteries even in battle.
Yeah, that is interesting. So for anyone that doesn't know, the I think it's called tefillin, right? Tefillin. Yeah. So like they link it to the whole thing in Deuteronomy where they say like, oh, you got to keep you have to keep your
The
kids.
word of God.
I'm sorry.
No.
I think it was
Keep
like
your
your kids and what something else too.
kids.
You got to keep it like on your
Oh,
on your
write
head
the
and
word
like-
of the
forehead
Lord on the
and on your
doorpost
arm.
of your house,
Yeah.
On the
between your
doorpost, yeah.
eyes, next to your write it on your arm or next to your heart. I can't remember the
Mhm.
exact phrasing.
yeah.
The
So
forehead
Make it
and
as a sign between your eyes and on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
doorpost of your house, and teach
Yeah.
it to your sons, and blah 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 blah.
yeah. So this
Yeah.
this probably would have been written like during the time where that kind of thing was just starting. But the like in later periods, like there are some Talmudic tractates that talk about like, okay, so you gotta have it on the top of your on top of your head, where like a baby soft spot would be, and then because you have to put it on with your right hand, you need to have the thing on your left arm. And of course, you get a
Also,
parody of
near
that
the
later
heart.
in Revelation.
Oh, I think
It's
you've
also
actually
'cause it's
talked
near
about
the
this
heart.
when we talked about Deuteronomy 6.
Yeah,
remember
probably,
correctly.
yeah.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
a while ago.
Yeah, that was a while.
Yeah, in the Bible, it literally just says like between your eyes and on your hand, but then the tradition, like the oral law, like has always said it was like higher up, like aligned between the eyes, but higher up over here, and not on the hand, but on the arm opposite the heart. Yeah,
I got another
but then
comment
they
from
do
All
a
the
special knot on
characters
the
in the
hand.
Bible.
got another comment from Matt White who says, Tomer and Isaac, can you confirm David's
David's
town,
town, yeah.
Bethlehem comes from Beth Elohim, house of the gods?
Definitely not. So the Hebrew name Bethlehem means house of bread, and actually in Arabic it's pronounced more or less the same, but in Arabic it means meat rather than bread. The same
Yeah.
word, pretty much. And I think the idea is that it originally was a pagan temple location, so the house of a pagan god. And so there is a Canaanite or Mesopotamian god called Lachmu or Lachamu. And so it's most probably it was originally the house of Lachmu, and then the Hebrew changed it to the house of bread to make it innocuous and like not be related to any pagan. history.
Yeah, I think we actually I know I mentioned that was it when we started the Deuteronomistic history, maybe?
Probably.
Yeah.
So, that means that perhaps the more original tradition of this was there was a temple there where gods are being fed with food, right? Is that the connection to bread?
No, it's pronounced in Hebrew. Bread is pronounced lechem, and that sounds like lechem, lachmu. However, it would have been like more or less the same word back then. So they just like it's not referring to a god; it's referring to bread, and they were just like the house of bread. That makes sense.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
By the way, Lawrence, I have to apologize. I still have not seen the whole video that you made on the flat Earth. I thought I would be able to do that on my ride down to Austin.
It's very good.
Yeah, it is. I could tell that was going to be very good. I was hoping that I would just put it like when I'm doing that 3.5 hour drive to Austin, I'll listen to that all the way down there. And the sad thing is I'm roaring down the road on 37-inch mud tires, and it's loud in that Jeep. I could not hear. your video at all.
Yeah, almost like your car sucks.
I had a Wrangler
But before,
once. They're loud as can be.
I would watch
before
it rather
mentioning
than just
that, yeah.
listen,
So it
though.
was. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. There's not much. There's some stuff that I show on screen that's like super important, but like usually I say like, oh, the thing I'm showing on screen now, is this super important thing. But I know that it's quite long, but yeah, there's
But
there's
it is
so
well.
much
I can tell it's well done, well researched. I managed at least a half hour of it before I get distracted and have to go run up and do something else. It's just I haven't had an hour and a half straight to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's completely understandable. It's I hope that it has illuminated some things for people. I tried to go as detailed as I reasonably could in the YouTube video, and I did try to contextualize it for lay people too.
Yeah, I really
Because-
appreciate it because I mean, how many times that argument comes up, where they just use the what is it, Isaiah 40:22, and that's it, right? It says circle, that means sphere,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you very much for producing that. Anybody hasn't seen it, if you've got an hour and a half and you want to know for certain that the Bible really does say that the earth is flat, the people who wrote the Bible were convinced that the earth is flat.
Yeah. There's just too much evidence in favor of that position. Now the reality is the earth is not flat, so
that's hard.
Apparently, we need to clarify that
we do,
in
unfortunately.
the year of Beyonce 2024.
Because the Bible never gets anything wrong.
While we're using satellite communication.
Right. Yeah. Well, reptoid hacker Illuminati conspiracy for no reason because Monday? No, I don't know. But yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to seeing it. I've been sick this week, and my brain is coming out my ears. But it's really fun. I do just usually say to Christians, oh, the circle of the earth. I'm sorry, do you not know the difference between a circle and a sphere? Or do you think they didn't have a word for ball?
Well, the interesting thing is they in the Bible, the word for ball isn't actually used for ball ever or for sphere. I know that I'm probably mispronouncing it. Is it pronounced kadur?
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So like that's what it is in modern Hebrew. It means like sphere or ball, but in biblical Hebrew, it never means that.
Like a lump, right?
Yeah, like a lump or a mound, a turban. Because they're I don't know,
Yeah,
vaguely spherical in shape. They're more round than not.
Well, the spherical meaning probably derived from that.
It's a concept of a sphere.
Yeah.
That's so good. Yeah, but the word that's used for circle always is hug. If they thought that the earth was a globe, they probably just would have used kadur at some point. So
kadur isn't necessarily anything perfectly spherical, just anything that protrudes in a rounded fashion.
Yeah.
Lawrence, I have to correct you on one thing, though.
Identify that.
Lawrence, I have to correct you on one thing. Arn's car isn't shit, because I have it on good authority that he took off the roof and the doors to be able to hear the tires.
The doors and roof have been on it since the tornado.
Oh.
Yeah, I have the tent to build so I can park my Jeep under the tent again, but I haven't put it up because I've been too busy.
I will never understand Arn's hatred of doors.
I could make a joke that maybe the tent doesn't fit when you finally put it up, because I remember a story with the roof that was stowed away too long and ended up not fitting
I'm
anymore.
interjecting. Feel we're a bit off topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tomer.
There might be another message, or no? No, there
No.
isn't. Okay.
No, there is.
Okay.
Okay. I'll continue on verse 12. The army of the Lord. Septuagint reads, the people of Judah. McCarter writes that Septuagint substituted Judah for Yahweh under the influence of the traditional pairing of Judah and Israel. Anderson writes that 2 Kings 9:6 may support the Masoretic text. On verse 13, I am a son of a foreigner and Amalekite. Hebrew for foreigner is gel, which is also rendered as sojourner by McCarter and Tsumura, protected alien by Anderson, or resident by Auld. Tsumura writes that the legal status of a gel was distinguished from that of a foreigner, nechar. The gel had a special status both with privileges and with responsibilities. He was protected by the community law, but also bound by legal obligations and penalties, as we see in Leviticus 22, 24, 16, and 22, verses 16 and 22. McCarter comments, it may be that like Doeg, the Edomite, who alone among the servants of Saul was willing to carry out the execution of the priests of Nob, in 1 Samuel 22, verses 17 through 19, this Amalekite was less scrupulous than a native-born Israelite might have been about the peculiar sanctity of the life he took. Even so, he can derive... Scrupulous.
Yeah,
fuck it.
scrupulous. I know it's a stupid one.
I said scrupulous, right? I don't know. Okay, even so, he can derive no excuse for his behavior from his Amalekite parentage. For legally, he is a sojourner in Israel and subject in this case to the same law as the native. And
yeah,
finally,
I feel like the word
sorry.
ger like changed over time and to become
Yeah.
to go from this like resident alien to being just a proselyte, someone who's converted.
Yeah.
And
So
so like the rabbis had to like be trying to explain like, oh, was this person a convert as well? It doesn't feel like the story is talking about a convert, and they're like they have to try and explain it away or something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
language does change over time, but still,
Yeah.
that means that the law that for the the native Israelites would have also prevented them from killing their king when he asked, because he was already dying.
Oh, we can.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
I mean,
Sorry.
I was just gonna say like suicide is forbidden, so yeah, killing someone to take away their pain is also forbidden. So yeah.
Okay, and finally, on verse 14, the Lord's anointed. Tsumura writes that as a sojourner who was subject to the laws of Israel, the Amalekite should have recognized the sanctity of Saul as his king. David himself refrained from killing Saul, saying that he was the Lord's anointed in 1 Samuel 24:6 and 26:9. Anderson, however, notes that some scholars, like Mettinger, argue that Saul was never anointed, and so the title applied to Saul is an anachronism. Bless you. He writes, however, that even so, the essence of the story would remain unchanged. He writes, quote, Saul had become king because it was believed that Yahweh was with him, as we see in 1 Samuel 10:7, 11:6, and 13. And as a divinely chosen leader, he was, more or less, inviolable. See Exodus 22:27, which is 28 in the Old Testament, I guess, whether anointed or not. It is far from certain that the inviolability of Yahweh's anointed was an invention of the later Davidic court to protect the Judean kings, but it would be in the king's interests to stress such a belief. Yeah, that's it for my commentaries part.
Yeah, David keeps going
All right.
on about don't touch the anointed one of God, blah blah blah, and then later on, all those men he took their wives away from couldn't kill him because he's the anointed one.
Yeah.
I'm getting shades of Joseph Smith.
Yeah. The real prophet.
All right. Well, we'll see how you feel about that once I read you this love letter. So
yeah.
continuing on.
Yes, sure.
David intoned his lamentation over Saul and his son Jonathan. He ordered that the song of the bow be taught to the people of Judah. It is written in the book of Jasher. He said, Your glory, O Israel, lies slain upon your high places. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, Proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon, or the daughters of the Philistines will rejoice. The daughters of the uncircumcised will exult. You mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew or rain upon you, nor bounteous fields. For there the shield of the mighty was defiled, the shield of Saul, anointed with oil no more. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back, nor the sword of Saul return empty. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and lovely, in life and in death, they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. O daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you with crimson and luxury, who put ornaments of gold on your apparel. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. Jonathan lies slain upon your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Greatly beloved were you to me. Your love to me was wonderful, passing the love of a woman. How the mighty have fallen, and the weapons of war perished.
I just have to say this. In my opinion, this is one of, if not the best poems in the Hebrew Bible, at least in Hebrew. I mean, for me at least, this is exceptional. When you read it in Hebrew, it's just my opinion. I think it's fantastic. And it is also very...
I think the LGBT
I'm going to say translating it isn't too
really
bad
nice.
either.
Yeah, but I mean, that section is fine, but I'm saying in general how the poem reads like a poem if you actually like read the Hebrew. It's...
Yes.
I think it's an excellent poem in my opinion.
It's giving Tolkien. The random
I'll
songs.
trust your judgment on the linguistic quality of the original Hebrew. But I definitely feel like the entirety of Christendom needs to scream "no homo" at the end of this.
I also am in the opinion that this is
as
not
loud as humanly possible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also of the opinion that this does not necessarily about homosexual relations.
Necessarily? No, I
very
would agree.
ambiguous.
I don't think it's necessary. However, I think what we know about the relationship of David and Jonathan beforehand, and the fact that his love is surpasses that of a woman.
Yeah,
I don't
but
know if that
considering
bit,
that this is,
though-
considering that this is a poem, it could be an exaggeration, right?
He
yeah,
says it before,
could be.
doesn't he? Doesn't he say it to him like earlier on? The same line?
What, did he
same
love thee
line?
more than the love of women? No, I don't think
I
so.
don't remember that.
I mean, the use of the
there's
word...
some stuff on Jonathan's love of David and like
Yeah, but...
1 Samuel 18:1 in 2017.
Yeah, but keep in mind that the Saul also is said to love David, and also the entire people of Judah and Israel also love David. So when it comes to the use of the verb ahav, love, it doesn't necessarily mean love as we know. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
but-
sure.
And also we're talking of-
Michal also is said to love David, but not necessarily. It's ambiguous, I would say.
Right.
that.
Not
It's
necessarily romantic love,
Well,
but
We're also talking about a time where where it was a lot more misogynistic, and so the love of a woman would have not been held in as such a high regard, and so for a brotherly love or a love between a king and his subject to be more than a woman's love is it doesn't necessarily say this is another type of they would have seen it as more important.
It's true. We do idolize romantic love in a way that is not normal for all cultures. Many cultures put filial and brotherly love above that.
Yeah.
I should also add that there is a book about the entire subject by James E. Harding called The Love of David and Jonathan, Ideology, Text, Reception. I haven't read through all of it, but if you're interested about the subject, I guess, though I have no idea about the quality of the work. So I've asked on Discord, and I was like, there wasn't really a response, but sure.
Trevor and Wright asks, what kind of relationship did David have with the rest of Israel that helped to promote him to the status of becoming king? And to what extent is it history Was it gradual or immediately?
It would have been gradual. So I mean, in reality, from what we can tell, it kind of seems like the historical David would have just been some warlord in Judah, and then like later on, once you have his house, the house of David, becoming more powerful, they would kind of later mythologize David, and they would add more stories to him, including stories that were originally someone else's, like Elhanan. But yeah, it was gradual until you get to. I mean, we're going to get to it later in this book with 2 Samuel 7, the dynastic promise, and then we're going to have quite a few things to talk about there.
And then Matt White says, Tomer, you don't appreciate Shakespeare until you read it in the original Hebrew.
Oh.
I don't know if this was a comment that got through, but someone said something very silly in the comment. Someone said that Antarctica is Latin for ice ring of death, and that is not true. Antarctica is Latin for where there is against the bear. It's where there is no bear in the sky. The Arctic is where the bear is, and then the Antarctic is where there is no bear. And this is before they knew about polar bears. It's just based on the constellation.
There are no polar
Yes,
bears
yes.
in Antarctica either.
The big
Yeah, I know,
Dipper
It's
is
an
sometimes
interesting
known as the bear,
coincidence.
but it's in some
It's a
cultures. But
coincidence.
it's I know, dude. It's just they're just
Oh,
mocking
someone
flat
answered him,
earthers
actually.
who won't
Yeah.
go to Antarctica to be proven wrong, because even if someone else pays for it, because they don't really care about truth. They just care about tantrums.
That's it. It's all a matter of make believe. The flat Earth thing and the young Earth creationism thing, they're just pretending.
Yeah,
If I had a TARDIS, if I had some way of guaranteeing to the person that, hey, we can really just step into this thing and just beam ourselves back safely to 10 million years ago, 100 million years ago, and come back, we've got this safe plan and all that, they wouldn't get in.
Well, actually, I think it's Greek rather than Latin, because Latin is Ursa, and Arctos is Greek. Yeah.
The point is, the person themselves was making a joke.
It'd be fun to go back to 6,000 years ago and see how old the world obviously was then. Anyway, are we ready to move on to what?
Comments.
I
So
believe
on verse
so.
17, yeah. So I'll start on verse 17. Lament. Bar-Efrat writes that a lament, in Hebrew kina, is a poem expressing sadness for a loss of an individual or a group. Some common features of biblical laments include the use of the words ech, how, as we say in Jeremiah 9:18 and Proverbs 5:12, and nafal, fell, meaning killed, description of some of the attributes of the dead person, and the call for women to cry and mourn about the disaster in Jeremiah 2:21. Many scholars date the lament to around David's time. McCarter writes that a later dating seems unlikely since, quote, the subject matter of the poem is specifically pertinent to the narrative context. The composition of an elegy for Saul and Jonathan generations after their death would be pointless, end quote. He writes that the attribution to David is probably not spurious, since, quote, the sentiments expressed in the lament correspond to those that David held, end quote. He concludes that quote, the narrator's claim about the authorship of our poem and the occasion of its composition are sound, end quote. Likewise, Tsumura quotes from Marcus Smith, quote, the poem fits a 10th century dating either in David's time or shortly thereafter, end quote.
And I can kind of see that argument because it like right beforehand, like he ordered that the Song of the Bow be taught to the people of Judah, and it's written in the book of Jasher, which is, we already described kind of, ideas surrounding the book of Jasher. But it's used as a source, right? So this Song of the Bow, maybe like an archer's bow or something.
You know what? Go ahead.
So it might be that. I'm not sure.
No, it's not it's not in the Hebrew Bible, but I think it's the.
So it says here that the name Song of the Bow does not appear in ancient manuscripts of the text of Samuel. The Masoretic text has simply a bow, which may mean that David commanded that the people should be trained in archery. The Septuagint has nothing at all, understanding lamentation of verse 17 to be what David wanted taught to the people. And then it just notes the book of Jasher.
Yeah.
So this song could have been, some generic lament that is being adapted for specifically Saul and Jonathan. Although I totally would understand the idea of it having something to do with battle, right? Because how there are so many references to their swords and their shields. And it also has beforehand it references like two big cities of the Philistines, right? Ashkelon and Gath, and then of course mentioning the Philistines themselves. So I could definitely see this being like a reworking of a much older song.
I think it would have been more adequate to use the reference of Saul's spear rather than a bow, but I don't know, maybe that was done on purpose to put distance between that and those narratives.
It's not. It's not really a spear though. It's a sword. Cherev.
He falls on a sword, but he's known to carry a spear as well.
Well,
he was never known for proficiency with a bow, I think is what he's saying. Although he did initially get caught by the archers. I don't know. It does, however, give a little bit of the film noir, Black Widow dramatically, dressing in her widow's weeds of grief and being very, very, very ostentatious in her mourning, as if she totally didn't poison her husband.
Yeah, it's a lot harder to fall on a spear. You gotta get up and stand on a chair first.
Hey, it would have been a done deal,
Yeah, maybe with a trampoline. You just got to get some height in there.
Well,
yeah.
Wasn't Saul supposed to be like 2 meters tall or something?
Oh,
wait, no.
No, that
he
was Noah.
He was tall. He was tall, though. It doesn't specify.
Right.
Okay. On verse 18, he ordered that the people of Judah be taught this lament of the bow. Hebrew Bible reads, and he said to teach the sons of Judah a bow. The inclusion of the word for bow, keshet, seems odd. Rashi comments, now that the mighty among Israel have fallen, the sons of Judah need to be taught how to make war and how to pull back a bow. End quote. This interpretation found acceptance among some English translations, like the KJV, and commentators like Eisfeld and Smith. Likewise, Tsumura proposed that the phrase is a heading, referring to how this lament was used, probably in connection with military training in fighting with the bow and other weapons. Bar-Efrat, however, rejects this, since there is no reason to include an instruction to teach the use of the bow when the matter of the lament is discussed. Other commentators propose that the name of the lament is bow. Anderson, for example, writes that keshet refers either to Jonathan's favorite weapon, as we see in 1 Samuel 18:4 and 20:20, or more likely to Jonathan himself. While this interpretation is followed by most modern translations, like NRSV, JPS, and NIV, Tsumura calls it pure speculation, with Bar-Efrat adding that this reading is based on the single use of the word keshet in the lament in verse 22. Alexandrinus does not mention a bow. Bar-Efrat writes that by removing the bow, the subject of the verb to teach is the lament. Thus, David ordered his people to learn this lament. McCarter also omits the bow, writing that the word probably found its way in the Masoretic text as a marginal gloss to some nearby passage. Anderson, however, notes that bow is used in all other major versions, and writes that the omission may be due to the failure to understand the significance of keshet in this context. Other interpretations include, David was encouraging the people to not give up, for the bow of war is in the hands of the Judites, according to Kimchi, or Saul and Jonathan were teaching the Judites to use the bow, according to Ditrani.
There's also another interpretation here from Alter.
It's a very weird sentence.
His translation is, and David sang this lament for Saul and for Jonathan, and he said to teach hard things to the sons of Judah. So He obviously notes that the Masoretic text has to teach the bow, a problematic reading because the lament scarcely provides instruction in the arts of war. Some critics delete bow, keshet, following the Septuagint. The present translation revocalizes keshet as kashut with Fackelman. So, yeah, so it's a revocalization of that to mean hard things.
Now on the book of Jasher, in Hebrew it's Sefer HaYashar. The book is also mentioned in Joshua 10:13 and possibly in the Septuagint on 1 Kings 8:53, which calls it the book of the song, reading Sefer Hashir. The word Yashar means straight or upright. Thus, Targum identified the book with the Torah, and Talmud Avodah
Definitely
Zarah-
not the book of the straight.
Yeah. And Talmud Avodah Zarah 25b, followed by Rashi, identified it with Genesis, since the patriarchs were upright. According to Rashi,
If this is the version of this, if this is the version of the song in the Book of the Straight, then I wonder what's in the other book.
According to Rashi, the reference is to Genesis 49:8. Quote, "You, O Judah, your brothers shall praise, your hand shall be on the nape of your foes." End quote. Most commentators, however, take the book of Jasher to be a lost poetry book, either of Judean or Ephraimite origin. On verse 19, the beauty of Israel, in Hebrew, Hatzvi Yisrael. The word tzvi can have several meanings. Some commentators, like Kara, Anderson, Auld, and Bar-Efrat, take tzvi to mean beauty or honor, based on passages like Isaiah 13:19 and 28:1. The beauty of Israel is taken to be Saul, who was known for his handsomeness. Tzvi can also denote a gazelle, as we see in 2 Samuel 2:18, 1 Chronicles 12:9, and Peshita. Anderson notes Driver's suggestion that the gazelle was Jonathan's sobriquet, by which he was known among the warriors and the people in general. McCarter,
Sorry, his what?
sobriquet, Sobriquet. That's how it is pronounced.
Oh,
And
I know that's not pronounced that way.
it is pronounced that way. I've checked this on dictionary.
Sobriquet?
I've checked on Merriam-Webster. Don't challenge me on this. It's
Okay.
sobriquet. Okay.
Sobriquet, not sobriquet.
Yeah, sobriquet. McCarter writes that this is an example of the common use of animal names as designations for heroes and other notable persons in Northwest Semitic literature. Following
Perfectly ordinary. Richard II was the Lionheart. You know, this is totally a thing everywhere.
Following Cross and Stewart, he renders "Alas, Prince of Israel," reading "Ho Tze'avi Yisrael," and takes it as referring to Saul, who was Israel's gazelle, quote unquote, i.e., commander or prince. This reading is also favored by Tsumura, who notes that designating notable people as cattle is also found in the Keret epic. Septuagint reads, "Set up a monument," reading "Hatzev Israel," which literally means erect Israel. McCarter writes that Hatzvi was misread in the tradition ancestor of the Septuagint to Hatzvu, and subsequently altered to Hatzev. Targum reads, "You took your stand, O Israel." On your heights, in Hebrew, Bamotecha, derived from Bama, usually rendered as high place, according to Peshita and Tsumura. Most commentators take Bamotecha here to refer to height or ridge, as we see in the Septuagint, or to the Gilboa mountain, according to Vulgate, Gersonides, and Bar-Efrat. McCarter writes that Bama, in its most primitive sense, referred to the swell of the rib cage of a human or an animal, and that other meaning, both anatomical, like back or flank, and topological, like high place, ridge, or hill flank, arose from this. Thus, the reference is to Saul's back, quote-unquote, i.e. the haunches or hips and loins. He writes that to be or stand upon one's backs, quote-unquote, is an idiom meaning to stand upright or erect. Thus, David praises Saul for having died in battle.
I mean, standing on one's back was also used for. I actually covered this in the video recently. That it is also used to mean like to defeat someone in battle, to stand on their back.
Yeah.
Very different from the Shakespearean idiom of falling on one's back.
Targum
I
avoid.
just had-
Sorry.
I just wanted to question if the how the mighty have fallen, if that was if that comes from this song or not.
Precious.
I mean, there's a very good chance of that.
Yeah, a lot of these sort of expressions end up in English sometimes.
Mhm.
I mean, isn't that
Okay.
quite the exaggeration? Like the guy panicked and then committed harakiri suicide or tried,
It's hard.
and like he wasn't really defeated by some great warrior or something. That I don't know. It just seems
Yeah,
like
but Jonathan was.
Yeah. Oh, Jonathan. Yeah, I was referring to Saul.
I mean, fallen can also mean like, fallen in grace, fallen in like how the mighty have fallen. Like Saul was this king, and now then through all of his deeds, he ended up in a position where he had to kill himself, and possibly not even be able to do that successfully, and have to be killed by someone else, in pain and whatnot. So.
Targum avoids referring to the high places by translating your stronghold. Anderson, however, writes that it is conceivable that later Israelites may have seen a possible association between the illegitimate high places and the tragic sacrifice offered, quote-unquote, on Mount Gilboa.
Yeah, I was going to ask: is there some implicit reference here to harem warfare? Just because he died in a high place where sacrifices might have been offered to the gods, or is that completely foreign from this?
I don't think so. I mean, if you want to read Bamot as like a type of altar, maybe, but I think if you read it in a more geographical sense, it may make more sense. I don't see really a harem warfare here, especially because I don't know if Philistines actually did harem. I think it's mostly Canaanite.
I do hear the reference to the high places as being historically sacred, and I don't know. It could be a bit of an idiom without it necessarily being a reference to that kind of warfare.
They could have built temples on high places because the high places were themselves like, saints, sacred or whatnot. So it's like he died on a sacred place, even if there was no temple there.
The concept of reaching to heaven, very much a theme in that part of the world.
Okay, on verse 21, may no showers fall on your terraced fields. In Hebrew, it's usdei trumot, literally, and fields of offerings. Most traditional commentators read the text as referring to the fields from which the first fruit offering, truma, is harvested. Likewise, Septuagint and Vulgate read fields of first fruits. McCarter, however, notes that Robert Gordis rejected this reading as, quote, far-fetched and unsatisfactory, end quote, and preferred reading ushdei from the Aramaic verb shtei, which means pour, flow, or empty out. The word tromot is amended by McCarter to tehomot, the deeps, noting parallels between Ugaritic and Hebrew passages, where each involves a wish for a failure of the sources of fresh water, not only from sources of water from above, like dew, dal, and rain, ravav, but also from sources of water from below. Thus, the reading of the deeps is in contrast with let there be no dew or rain on you. Thus, McCarter renders hustei tehomot, which reads the flowing of the deeps. Anderson, however, retains the Masoretic text reading of terumot, since it, quote, makes a reasonable sense and is semantically possible, end quote, and translates ustei terumot to mean mountain slopes. Bar-Efrat and Tsumura render fields of heights, with the latter writing that heights is based on the verbal root resh vav mem, to be exalted or be high. Targum reads, let there be no sufficient yield on you, and Peshita, nor on the fields that are set apart. On that same verse, the shield of Saul no longer rubbed in oil. McCarter writes that the shields were made of leather and were oiled to keep them ready for use. He quotes from Millard, quote, the Sumerian shesh is equivalent to Akkadian pashashu, a verb used like the Hebrew mashach for anointing in both secular and sacred senses, end quote. Anderson notes that the word for a shield, magen, may in some contexts mean chieftain or suzerain. Thus, M. O'Connor renders, quote, there the warrior's leader was disgraced, leader Saul was anointed with oil, end quote. Anderson, however, writes that it is doubtful that this is any improvement.
Wait,
On
wasn't David his armor bearer at one time who would have
He
taken
was.
care of his armor? Like
was,
personally oiled it and shit?
On verse 22, the flesh of the mighty, in Hebrew, michelev giborim, literally from the fat of warriors. Several commentators note that blood and fat are a common pair found in the Bible denoting sacrifice, as we see in Exodus 23:18, Isaiah 1:11, and Ezekiel 39:19. Anderson writes that it is possible that the poet thought of Saul and Jonathan's victories as reminiscent of a sacrifice offered to God. McCarter adds that fat seems to have been thought of as the seat of power and strength. Abravanel wrote that the fat and blood was that of the Israelites who died in battle, and that even though Saul and Jonathan witnessed the bloodshed happening in front of them, they still did not detract from fighting heroically. On verse 24, who clothed you in scarlet and finery. The word for scarlet is shani. Tsumura notes that scarlet cloth, made from the bodies of various kermes insects, was a sign of prosperity, as we see in Proverbs 31:21. The word for finery is adanin, which is used in Jeremiah 51:34, which is 24 in the Old Testament, to refer to food. A reading found in Targum, quote, who clothed you with scarlet cloths and brought you delicacies, end quote. McCarter notes that the basic meaning of Eden is to provide richly, and reads luxurious crimson. Anderson writes that from the context, this refers to the rich booty which Saul may have gained during his numerous wars. And finally, on verse 26, your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of a woman. David's love, quote-unquote, to Jonathan is attested frequently in 1 Samuel, as we see in 18 verses 1 through 5, 19 1 through 7, chapter 20, and 21:1. McCarter writes that in the ancient Near East, love, quote-unquote, belonged to the language of political discourse, and many of the statements made about Jonathan's love for David are charged with political overtones. He adds, however, that the passage here hints to a warm personal intimacy, quote-unquote, in the relationship between the two men. Anderson notes that some commentators, like Tom Horner, suggested that David and Jonathan's relationship was homosexual. He writes that while the language of the poem may permit such an interpretation, the general attitude of the Bible, Leviticus 18:22 and 20:13, seems to contradict this interpretation. Furthermore, quote, one must bear in mind the poetic nature of this lament and the fact that David's heterosexual relationships are well attested, end quote.
Oh my god, I forgot that bi people don't exist. You're right. No, so I do understand that, like, you know, this is supposed to be kind of, you know, flowery language and all that. Very, you know, it exaggerates a lot. But the thing is, the fact that we even saw kind of like hints of that kind of relationship before, to me, would be like, well, yeah, sure, I'm fine accepting that they were totally into each other. It's very not unlike Achilles and Patroclus. So like, I could totally see it.
Also, wouldn't have like Exodus 18, Leviticus have come much later?
Well, I don't know about
post-exilic.
Also, marriage
I don't
to
know
women
much,
was
but-
political and about having sons, so you could continue your kingly line. So, you know.
So is that sort of saying, like, in spite of the fact that, you know, there's no reproduction available, the love for this man was greater than that of one where that can be the case?
Yeah, so
Again, I think-
Lilith's point is that, like, the love of women didn't matter as much.
I personally see it as poetic exaggeration. Like, it can be explained that.
I think you just don't want to picture them fucking.
I won't comment.
That's okay. I'll picture for the both of us.
Not creepy.
No, I am just going to tap out, guys, because I'm the guys know I'm not well. I just wanted to say goodbye to Scott. I love you all.
I've
I love
always
you.
known you
Feel
were
better.
not well.
Hmm?
I've always known you were not well.
Well, yes, but this is the chest cold, not the crazy. Anyway,
I get you.
mwah.
My.
Get well soon.
And I should finish with one Christian commentator, Chrysostom, who wrote that the mutual love of Jonathan and David, lamented at Jonathan's death, characterizes a wonderful and exemplary friendship.
Ah,
Yeah, how
okay.
nice.
Very,
Is it?
very archaeology of him. It's like
And
they were
and al-
roommates.
Yeah, and also, as David desired to keep the news of Saul's death from enemy ears, so Christians must resist spreading news of another's failure or downfall.
Okay.
Yes. If you yes, Christians, if you hear that someone has sinned and has abused someone, don't tell anyone. Keep it a secret.
Yeah.
Are we then
Yeah.
ready to move on to 2 Samuel
Yes.
2, also known as
Yes.
Samuel squared?
Yeah. Yeah. Read through verse 11.
Okay. In the course of time, David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go up to one of the towns of Judah?" he asked. The Lord said, "Go up." David asked, "Where shall I go?" "To Hebron," the Lord answered. So David went up there with his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. And David also took the men who were with him, each with his family, and they settled in Hebron and its towns. Then the men of Judah came to Hebron, and they anointed David king over the tribe of Judah. Then David was told that it was the men from Jabesh Gilead who had buried Saul. He sent messengers to them to say to them, "The Lord bless you for showing this kindness to Saul, your master, by burying him. May the Lord now show you kindness and faithfulness, and I too will show you the same favor because you have done this. Now then, be strong and brave, for Saul, your master, is dead, and the people of Judah have anointed me king over them." How far did you want me to read?
11.
Okay. Meanwhile, Abner, son of Ner, the commander of Saul's army, had taken Ishbosheth, son of Saul, to be brought him over to Mahanaim. Okay.
Close
He
enough.
made him king over Gilead, Ashuri, Jezreel, and also over Ephraim, Benjamin, and all Israel. Ishbosheth, son of Saul, was 40 years old when he became king of Israel, and he reigned for 2 years. The tribe of Judah, however, remained loyal to David. The length of time David was king in Hebron over Judah was 7 years and 6 months.
I think that means that, during the period where Avner was going around making Ishbosheth more and more strong, first with like the king of the Gibeonites, and then the tribe, and then all of Israel, it took him a few years for that to happen. So he was only king over all Israel for 2 years, and what's his name? David was king in Hebron for 7.5 years or whatever it was. So it would have been like the last 2 years. So they could have been a bit more explicit, I think, but
Yeah, and I should
that's
also
what it's trying to say.
I mean, he was also basically anointed by Saul in that like weird story about them in the cave where he like takes part of his robe or something.
Right. The Ishbosheth wasn't named as an heir or anything like that.
Yeah.
I was going
And
to say, it
also
doesn't help
Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
that it doesn't help that his name literally means man of shame.
yes.
Yeah, apparently this is they changed it from Ishbal.
Yeah, so
But
my
then it's like,
my
why would his name have been Ishbal in the first place?
well, yeah, they are restoring a theophoric name.
Though-
So no,
go ahead.
in this translation they have Ishbaal, and then they note that the Hebrew is Ishbosheth. But my guess why they went with it's in the Greek apparently. But my guess would be like, which one is more likely to be the original. Like if this is considering the area that it's in, you're likely to have theophoric names that have things like Baal in them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we don't believe if this story was true when it was written and whatnot, like they wouldn't have necessarily been completely monotheistic. So, the king's son being called Ishbaal is not like unheard of. I mean, it could also be referring to a time when Baal was used as like an alternative to Yahweh at the same time. And then like later on, it was like, no, you can't use Baal to refer to Yahweh. So Ishbosheth. Yeah.
Well,
sure
there are
about that.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think McCarter argues that Baal was at an earlier point basically like the same name for Yahweh, and he also notes an opinion by Matityahu Tsevat that Boshet is actually an epithet, compared with Bashtu. But I'll get to that.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I think I should start. If nobody else has to say. Okay, so I'll start on verse 1 about Hebron. Tsumura writes that Hebron is, quote, a good place to establish David's home base, away from the Philistines and against the Saulite kingdom, end quote. It is located 25 through 31 miles, or 40 to 50 kilometers from Tziklag, and was near Bethlehem, David's hometown, with his wives being from that area. Tsumura writes that this allowed David to unite Judah and other southern clans, like the Calebites, Kenizzites, Kenites, and Yerachmeelites. Although we're not told what the Philistines' or Achish's reaction was, we can assume that they approved of the move. Some commentators, like Auld, Anderson, and Garsiel, see David's new kingdom as a vassal state and part of the Philistine system of government, with Anderson writing that this could explain the prolonged war between David's forces and those of Ishbosheth in 2 Samuel 3:1. On verse 4, anointed. Samuel already anointed David in 1 Samuel 16:13. McCarter writes that in the older narrative, David is anointed without reference to a prophet or to a priest, and, quote, the basis for his election is popular initiative rather than prophetically mediated divine designation, end quote. Likewise, Anderson comments, quote, perhaps Mettingale is right in suggesting that it is probable that, quote, from Solomon onwards the rite was performed by a priest, end quote, while previously the anointing was a secular rite carried out by the representatives of the people. Only later it became a sacral act which brought about a new relationship between God and the king, and therefore it would be performed by a priest acting in the name of Yahweh. This explanation assumes that the accounts of anointing in 1 Samuel are either later interpretations, or that we are dealing with two different types of anointing, one divine and leading to the status of the anointed of Yahweh, the other secular and leading to the office of a king of a particular territory. On verse 6, kindness and faithfulness. Hebrew Bible reads chesed ve'emet, literally grace and truth. And Tsumura comments, the Handaides, a gracious and truthful deed, appears again in 2 Samuel 15 verses 19 through 20, where David, during his escape from Absalom, urges his faithful servant Ittai the Gittite to go back and stay with Absalom. He discharges Ittai's obligation to himself and blesses him using this phrase. According to K.D. Sackenfeld, by using a similar blessing, David is here suggesting that the political relationship between Jabesh Gilead and Saul was at an end, though in the case of Ittai, David, the beneficiary of the obligation, discharges the obligation, while David has no right to discharge the responsibility to Saul. However, he may be implying that by their good deed, they have themselves discharged the responsibility to Saul, and that, quote, they are now free to establish a new formal relationship with David rather than with Saul's descendants, which David offers and suggests that they do, end quote. This point is made clear in the expression, and now may the Lord and I too. On verse 8, Ishbosheth. The name Ishbosheth in Hebrew literally means a man of shame. According to 1 Chronicles 8:33 and 9:39, he is called Eshbaal, which means man of Baal. Although Kimchi wrote that Baal and Bosheth are synonymous, the mainstream theory is that Eshbaal was his true name, with Bosheth being a, quote, euphemistic substitution, end quote, for Baal, according to Anderson, Bar-Efrat, and McCarter. The name Baal was altered to Bosheth to avoid or defame the Canaanite deity. Thus, Aquila, Theodotion, and Semachus render Ishbaal, and Peshitta renders Ashbashul. There are some, however, who dissent from this theory. Tsumura, for example, writes that it seems unlikely that Saul named his son after the Canaanite god Baal, since he is depicted as a Yahwist in the Bible. He also notes that that the word Baal can mean Lord, and whether Baal in the name refers to the Canaanite god or just means Lord is hotly debated, quote unquote. McCarter notes Matityahu Tzevat's opinion that Bosheth is a divine name or epithet. Tzevat compared Bosheth with the Akkadian onomastic element Bashtu, which means dignity, pride, and vigor, and thus guardian angel or protective spirit. He argued that the Hebrew element, quote, does not have quite the force of the Akkadian, but is rather to be understood as a divine feature turned epithet, end quote. While Tzevat notes that in post-biblical times there were tendencies to defame pagan deities, he doubts that this was the case in biblical times. McCarter, however, finds Tzevat's argument to be seriously impaired, quote unquote, because Tzevat fails to treat passages where Bosheth has been substituted with Baal in the contexts exclusive to a proper name, like in 1 Kings 18 verses 19 and 25. Instead, McCarter takes Baal to be, quote, an acceptable epithet of Yahweh in the early days of the monarchy, end quote. He notes David Noel Friedman's opinion that the name Be'aliyah in 1 Chronicles 12:6 seems to mean Yahweh is Lord, and takes Ishbaal to mean man or servant of the Lord. He argues that in later tradition, Baal was associated with the Canaanite god Hadad or Hadu, hence its frequent mutilation to Bosheth, which means shame.
And on that, like, we do have another occurrence of this. So, this is noted by David T. Lamb. He notes that what was it? 2 Samuel uses an insulting version of the name to disparage Saul's legacy after Saul and Jonathan die in battle. In Hebrew, the son of Saul is called Ishbosheth, which means man of shame. Similarly, in Chronicles, Saul's disabled grandson is called Meri-Baal, which means opponent of Baal or loved by Baal. But in 2 Samuel, he is Mephibosheth.
Mephibosheth.
Which means from the mouth of the shameful thing. In both instances, the biblical authors appear to be literally heaping shame on these two descendants of Saul, presumably to give greater legitimacy to the reign of Saul's rival and ultimate successor, David.
On that same verse, about Machanaim, the name means twin camps. It is generally identified as modern Tel Eb Dahab el Garbi, located near the Yabok River, and according to Tsumura, was apparently the capital of Gilead. The narrator does not give a reason for Abner choosing Machanaim as the provisional capital, quote-unquote, of the reduced kingdom. Anderson proposed that Machanaim was outside Philistine reach, and that the population of Machanaim included some Benjaminite elements, and so Abner and Ishbosheth could have found some loyal support there. Finally, on verse 9, about the Ashuri. This reflects the Masoretic text reading, the Ashuri is from the NIV, this reflects the Masoretic text reading Ha-Ashuri. While this generally refers to the Assyrians, it is highly unlikely that Ishbosheth ever ruled over them. Voget and Peshitta read Geshurites, reflecting Ha-Geshuri. Targum reads the house of Asher, reflecting Ha-Asheri. And Vaticanus read Thasiri, and Lucenic Recension Ezri. McCarter favors the reading Geshurites, since it is geographically suited to its position in the list given. Van Staldine Salman, however, writes that this emendation is highly improbable, since the Geshurites seem to have an independent king, according to 2 Samuel 3:3. Likewise, Abramski, Anderson, and Bar-Efrat prefer the Targum reading of Asher. Tsumura, however, rejects this and writes that they were an identified group of people. Unidentified. Sorry.
Oh, he just says like we don't know who it is.
Yeah. We don't know who they are.
Okay.
Okay, was that
Yeah. I should also note that there is a comment by Auld regarding this. He notes that the DJD, i.e. the discovers the desert, reconstructs Gesher, but without comment. Vaticanus would retrovert to an otherwise unknown Teshiri, Teshiri, while Lucenic Recension is Esri. Alter notes that it is simplest, quote unquote, to read Masoretic text as a mistake for Asherite. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
That does make that seems to be the most simple explanation. It's just referring to the tribe of Asher.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's just a misspelling.
Shall I continue then?
Sure.
Okay. Abner, son of Ner, together with the men of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, left Mahanaim and went to Gibeon. Joab, son of Jeruiah.
Zeruiah.
Say again?
Zeruiah.
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 Okay.
Yeah, I think in English you would just say like Zuriah, right?
Yeah.
Zuriah.
Zeruiah.
Yeah, because an E sounds like a U.
That helps.
Sorry, just my rant in English.
Yep.
And David's men went out to meet them and met them at the pool of Gibeon. One group sat down at one side of the pool and one group on the other side. Then Abner said to Joab, "Let's have some of the young men get up and fight hand in hand in front of us." "All right, let them do it," Joab said. Live entertainment.
Yep.
So they stood up and were counted off, 12 men for Benjamin and Ishbosheth, son of Saul, and 12 for David. Then each man grabbed his opponent by the head and thrust his dagger into the opponent's side. And they fell down together. So that place in Gibeon was called Helkath Hazarim, because that's where
It
crack
means the
suicide squad killed themselves.
it
And,
means the field of the flints.
okay, so, gosh, that was fun.
Yep.
Now we have half as many men. All right.
No, all
All of them
24 of them died.
Yeah.
All of them.
The 12 pairs killed each other.
Yeah.
Back to back.
Well, we don't have enough
Face each other.
much food to feed everybody, so kill yourselves. Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Well, it was unintended. But
And
yeah.
this, you see, is why they invented television.
You still have wrestling though.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Wrestling is amazing.
Yeah, well, that would involve a lot less stabbing.
And I mean professional wrestling, not that silly amateur stuff they do at the Olympics.
Oh, there's nothing amateur about jabbing a dagger into it. Was just both of you stab each other to death, and then everybody fall down dead. Well, that was exciting. The battle that day was fierce, very fierce, and Abner and the Israelites were defeated by David's men. You said they all died.
No,
No, no.
only the 24.
Okay.
The 24 that they
They
sent.
first weren't going to fight. And they were like, oh, let's sport. Let's have a play fight. And we're going to have 12 young men from each side wrestle. And then they hated each other so much that they decided to all stab each other. They all died. They killed each other at the same time, which is a very stupid story. And then they said after that, they started a battle where David won very badly.
Isn't the whole point whenever you have like these like special tournaments that sometimes a whole battle may be avoided if one of those two special teams wins and whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is. I think it's also.
But since no one won, the competition, it devolved into an outright battle. Yeah.
It's a battle by representative, which is also tested in engineers. I'll get to that.
With no technology or any kind of entertainment, I don't know what else to do. I'm bored. Let's kill each other.
That's how
they were
cinema
supposed to
was made.
waltz, but no one taught them the right steps. So
Okay, the three sons of Zeruiah, I think I got it. The three sons of Zeruiah were there, Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Now Asahel was fleet-footed as a wild gazelle. He chased Abner, turning neither to the right nor to the left as he pursued him. Abner looked behind him and asked, "Is that you, Asahel?" "It is," he answered. Then Abner said to him, Turn aside to the right or to the left, and take on one of the young men and strip him of his weapons. But Asahel would not stop chasing him. Again, Abner warned Asahel, "Stop chasing me! Why should I strike you down? How could I look your brother Joab in the face?" But Asahel refused to give up the pursuit. So Abner thrust the butt of his spear into Asahel's stomach, and the spear came out through his back. He fell there and died on the spot. Seems like a good place to do it. And every man stopped when they came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died. But Joab and Abishai pursued Abner, and as the sun was setting, they came to the hill of Ammah near Giah on the way to the wasteland of Gibeon. Then the men Benjamin rallied behind Abner. They formed themselves into a group and took their stand on top of a hill. Abner called out to Joab, "Must the sword devour forever? Don't you realize that this will end in bitterness? How long before you order your men to stop pursuing their fellow Israelites?" Joab answered, "As surely as God lives," which is not very sure, it turns out. "If you had not spoken, the men would have considered pursuing them until morning." So Joab blew the trumpet, and all the troops came to a halt. They no longer pursued Israel, nor did they fight any more. All that night, Abner and his men marched through Arabah. They crossed the Jordan, continued through the morning hours, and came to Mahanaim. Then Joab stopped pursuing Abner and assembled the whole army. Besides Asahel, 19 of David's men were found missing. But David's men had killed 360 Benjaminites who were there with Abner. Who were with him? Okay. They took Asahel and buried him in his father's tomb at Bethlehem. Then Joab and his men marched all night and arrived at Hebron by daybreak. I feel like this is another. I need to remind people that this is supposed to be God's eternal word for all of the people on earth. And it's entirely provincial and pointless and doesn't matter.
I don't know about you. It's entertaining.
Yeah.
I don't know. This story isn't well written.
Yeah. Well, I'm
Like the
bored.
whole-
Let's
the
kill
whole,
each
like-
other for no reason.
Yeah, that was a bit stupid. Like, let's just take 12 people, and then each of them did the same action. They each stabbed each other at the same time. It's like, that's kind of that's immature. Like, that's bad writing. Like,
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay. I'll start on verse 13. Yoab, son of Tzeruiah. Tzeruiah was Joab's mother and David's sister, according to 1 Chronicles 2:16. Tsumura notes that it was unusual for a man to be known by his mother's name, and speculates that Joab's father probably died young, as he had a grave in Bethlehem, according to verse 32. He also notes that in 2 Samuel 17:25, Abigail is identified as the daughter of Nachash, sister of Tzeruiah. Thus, Abigail and probably Tzeruiah were maternal half-sisters of David by an earlier marriage of their mother. McCarter suggested that Tzeruiah's marriage was of a special kind, and that her father was not a member of a household. Was not a member of her household. Yeah, I double wrote that. In that case, it wouldn't seem unusual for children to be called by the mother's name, especially if she was a member of the royal family. He also notes Van Seders' opinion that Tzeruiah is actually the father, but he rejects this reading. There's our BFF, Lawrence.
Maybe one day I'll get to talk with that man, but
Yeah.
he's pretty old, and he also leads a very private life. So
He's very set in his ways.
Yeah.
Ay, ay, ay. Okay, verse 14, fight hand to hand in front of us. Hebrew Bible reads, and they shall play vayesachaku before us. The root shin chet kuf has several meanings, with one of them being to play or to sport, according to early translations. McCarter notes that many commentators, like Budd and Segal, argue that this clash was a mere sport that got out of hand, which developed into a battle. He notes that suggestion of L.W. Batten that the men of Ishbosheth did not play fairly, being right-handed men, and carrying concealed weapons to be drawn with their left hands, just like Ehud, the Benjaminite hero, dating Judges 3, verses 15 to 30. Sorry.
You mean the other way around? That they were left-handed and they kept their weapon on the right side?
No, wait a minute.
Because if they were right-handed with the weapon in the left, that would be normal.
Let me check. I think right-handed was the right.
That's
the right
right.
one.
Us lefties are abnormal.
Yeah. Where is it?
So I assume, Isaac, that you took that personally.
No, I'm just saying, like, I just called being right-handed normal. So.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, as in more like a stress
Yeah.
that, like.
No.
Yeah.
Being right-handed men, Benjaminites. Yeah, that's right.
That's weird. Maybe the person who wrote that made the mistake.
Okay. Yeah, where was I? Okay. McCarter, however, prefers Eisfeld's reading that this is a case of battle by representative, which are well attested in the ancient Near East. This understanding has found support among modern commentators.
Also, David and Goliath is set up just like that.
I think so. Yeah, it is set like that.
No,
as
they,
well.
they don't say sport. They don't use the word.
Well, yeah. These guys initially they started off as just like, hey, let's have a nice contest, and then it gets very much out of hand.
Yeah, but I think he's saying that this commentator is saying that it doesn't mean like a play fight. It means that let's just have someone representative fight for us. And like, you know, they might die, but it's like sport, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess back in the day, right?
Sports. Yeah.
It does look like the only usage of that word as to mean to fight is this text, because all the other ones are like play, dance, amuse, entertain, even laugh in some texts.
Yeah.
Oh,
The laugh and the verb that's used here is sachak with a sin, like an S sound, and laugh is very similar. It's a tsep. So it's actually very similar word, like laugh, shout, and play are all very similar. They're off by one letter each.
Yeah, there's a lamed prefix, I think.
That just means two. Yeah, to play, to.
Auld notes that play seems heavily ironic in view of the outcome, unless something like sportive martial arts or jousting has been intended. Okay, on verse 16, each man grabbed his opponent by the head and thrust his dagger into his opponent's side. McCarter notes that a relief from Tel Chalaf, biblical Gozan, which he dates from a time almost contemporary with the events of the chapter, provides, quote, a striking illustration of soldiers in just such a posture, end quote. Yeah, that's all included. Now on Chelkat Hatsurim, the name literally means the portion of the flints. The flints can refer to the weapons used in the contest, according to Rashi, Titrani, followed by Bar-Efrat and McCarter. But Tsumura argues that blades made during the 10th century BCE were made of either bronze or iron, not flints. Early translations take the tsurim to refer not to weapons, but to the people. Thus, Septuagint reads, portion of the plotters, probably reading tsurim as tsarim, which means adversaries. Vulgate reads, the field of the valiant. Targum reads, the inheritance of the killed ones. Kara and Kimchi took the flints to refer to the strong ones who fought against each other.
Yeah. It sounds like a really badly thought of etiology. Like, here's a place name. Let's explain the place name with a weird story from David's campaign history. And yeah, yeah, it's probably a much older, like the real etiology, the real etymology of the word name would have been much older.
Yeah, as they usually are.
Yeah,
But they
Oh,
did
yeah,
use
exactly.
flint knives for like circumcision, right?
I don't
that-
think so. I
Is
think
that
that's
what they
also
used for you, Mark?
probably better than teeth.
Right.
Okay, on verses 21 through 22, Anderson notes that earlier scholars like Budd and Stoltz interpreted Abner's suggestion to Asahel as an attempt to prevent blood guilt, since this blood was shed in war, as we see in 1 Kings 2 verses 5, 31 through 33. He writes, however, that it seems difficult to see how all blood shed in war could be avenged. Yeah. It seems difficult to see how all blood shed in war could be avenged, except in another war. He writes that Abner's primary concern may have been with his own honor, rather than his hypothetical friendship with Joab or fear of the latter. On verse 23, Abner thrust the butt of his spear. Hebrew Bible reads, Abner struck him with the back of the spear. Bar-Efrat writes that the back of the spear usually had a metal blade, which gave balance to the spear, and was sometimes used to stick the spear in the ground, as we see in 1 Samuel 26:7. Anderson notes that Abner, using the butt of his spear, gives further proof of his superiority. He notes other suggestions that Abner struck Asahel backwards with the butt end while running, according to Kennedy, or that Abner stopped suddenly and let Asahel run on his spear, according to Herzberg, but he rejects these opinions.
Yeah, you probably would need both a backwards thrust and the force of someone running into it to impale them properly.
Yeah.
I
On
don't think the
stomach,
writers were going for realism in the.
yeah, who does? On that same verse, stomach in Hebrew chomesh. Traditional commentators derive the word from chamesh, which means 5. For example, Rashi renders the 5th rib, the place where the bile and the liver are set. However, Anderson takes chamesh to refer to the abdomen and notes that the word occurs only 3 times elsewhere in the Old Testament: 2 Samuel 3:27, 4:6, and 20:10. Halot notes that the word chomesh in the sense of abdomen or belly is attested in cognate languages like Syriac, Ethiopian, Tigrinya, and Akkadian.
I do like hummus, yeah.
Okay. On 24, the hill of Amma, in Hebrew Givat Amma. The exact location of this place is unclear. The word Amma in Rabbinic Hebrew means canal or sewer. Thus, Kimchi suggested that there was a water canal next to the hill. Likewise, Peshitta renders Gibeath of the sea. Aquila, Theodotion, and Vulgate render the hill of the aqueduct. Anderson notes BHK's emendation to Giv'ah Achat, a certain hill. He writes, quote, in that case, Joab and his men came to a particular hill, while Abner and his followers gathered themselves on another Achat hill close by.
I mean, this would be a different one than the one made by Hezekiah, because we know where that one is, and I don't know how close that is to this place, but
Yeah, you wouldn't put a sewer in a hill, so it doesn't make any sense.
I mean, either way, I think if there was excavation at this place, I mean, just like we found the one from Hezekiah's time.
Shiloh.
Sorry, what?
Yeah.
It's the Shiloh. It's called the Shiloh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like Shiloh tunnel.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Shiloh.
I see it. I see it spelled in many ways. But yeah, it would be interesting to find something like that at this hill, or like nearby it.
I mean, like the wilderness of Gibeon, Giach, we don't know where that is. and a hill. Yeah.
Yeah,
it'd
that
be-
doesn't really tell you
Yeah.
tell you much.
And
Yeah, it doesn't.
finally, on verse 29, the morning hours. Hebrew Bible reads Kol habitron, literally all of Bithron. The word Bithron is a hapax, and its exact meaning is unclear. Vulgate and traditional commentators like Rashi, Kara, and Kimchi took Bithron to be a place name. Likewise, BDB Dictionary, Auld, and Bar-Efrat render the cleft, with the latter deriving Bithron from the root Beit Tafresh, to cut or divide, taking Bithron to be the Yabok River or one of the rivers nearby. Septuagint reads, the whole stretch of time ahead, taking Bithron to be the time taken to traverse the area between the Jordan Valley and Machanaim, according to Anderson. This reading is favored by Menachem ben Chelbo, according to Kara, Tsumura, and McCarter. Targum preserves the Hebrew Bithron, but Van Starda and Solomon notes that in Aramaic, Bithron must have sounded like thereafter, as if it were the preposition Bethel with the ending on, thus keeping in line with modern scholars. She also notes that in a margin of Codex Oichilinianus, Bithron is interpreted as divisions, and thus the division went and arrived at Machanaim. And Peshitta renders the front of Geshur. And now I have one Christian commentator, that is Gregory the Great, who writes that Abner's slaying of Asahel symbolizes how gentle and calm reasoning humbles the one driven by a violent frenzy.
I swear, that guy sucks.
So
Gregory
cringe.
the Great, like holy shit. The cope on that guy.
At least it's just like, here is like a moral lesson we can take from this, rather than like this is a premonition of Jesus, you know? Like,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the need to find a moral lesson in every story is interesting in of itself. It's almost like they don't think that the stories are literally true.
But they are.
Oh, or maybe there was a theological reason for like, why do we need the Old Testament, right? What's the reason for the Old Testament? We just need the New Testament. So like, okay, you need to learn something from the Old Testament.
You're reproaching Marcionism here.
Yeah, I'm always amused at the people that call themselves New Testament Christians.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, if you read Matthew, Jesus wants you to basically be a Torah believing Jew. So
Yeah.
So
And so you're also advocating that we put the Ten Commandments up in classrooms. What part of the New Testament is that?
right, yeah. Especially when asked about like which one was the important one. Like it's not like he's like
It is not boiling a baby goat in its own mother's milk, right?
of all the laws, yeah.
All right, so are we moving then to 2 Samuel 3?
Sure.
Okay, who's reading that one? Mark?
Sure.
Yeah,
All right,
sure.
thank you.
Read through 19.
Okay. All right. However, the war was prolonged between the house of Saul and the house of David. David was becoming steadily stronger while the house of Saul was becoming increasingly weaker. Now, the sons who were born to David in Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon, born to Ahinoam the Jezreelite. His second son was Kileab, born to Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. His third son was Absalom, the son of Maacah, daughter of King Talmai of Geshur. His fourth son was Adonijah, the son of Haggith. His fifth son was Shephatiah, the son of Abital. His sixth son was Ithream, born to David's wife Eglah. These sons were all born to David in Hebron. As the war continued between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner was becoming more influential in the house of Saul. Now Saul had a concubine named Rizpah, daughter of Aiah. Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why did you have sexual relations with my father's concubine?" These words of Ishbosheth really angered Abner, and he said, "Am I the head of a dog that belongs in Judah? This very day I am demonstrating loyalty to the house of Saul, your father, and his relatives and his friends. I have not betrayed you in the hand of David. Yet you've accused me of sinning with this woman today. God will severely judge Abner if I don't do for David exactly what the Lord had promised him, namely, to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and to establish the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, all the way from Dan to Beersheba." Ishbosheth was unable to answer Abner with even a single word because he was afraid of him. Then Abner sent messengers to David, saying, "To whom does the land belong? Make an agreement with me, and I will do whatever I can to cause all Israel to turn to you." So David said, "Good, I'll make an agreement with you. I ask only one thing from you. You will not see my face unless you bring Saul's daughter Michal when you come to visit me." David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, son of Saul, with this demand: "Give me my wife Michal, from whom I acquired for 100 Philistine foreskins." So Ishbosheth took her from her husband Paltiel, son of Laish. Her husband went along behind her, weeping all the way to Bahurim. Finally, Abner said to him, "Go back." So he returned home. Abner advised the elders of Israel, "Previously you were wanting David to be your king. Act now, for the Lord has said to David, 'By the hand of my servant David, I will save my people Israel from the Philistines and from all their enemies.'" Then Abner spoke privately with the Benjamites. Abner also went to Hebron to inform David privately of all that Israel and the entire house of Benjamin had agreed to.
So there's definitely quite a bit here to talk about. So firstly, the the houses that are in competition. Again, we have, it's almost like it didn't happen for them. David already got the whole kingdom basically from Saul. Saul was just like, "Here you go, you win, I guess. You're so amazing. Thanks for sparing my life." But yet, there is still not a full acknowledgement. Taken as if we take it as a narrative, there's not a full acknowledgement here of David's leadership. And now we're gonna get Abner kind of deflecting over to David. Cat, get the hell out of here! Stop eating that. That's not food. And there's also the the thing is he did technically buy Michal, right? And there was, where was it? It was in 1 Samuel 25:44. I think that's where. Yeah, that's where he gave her to somebody else, to this guy, who she's currently with. But the thing is, he David already had what was it? I think it was listed as having 2 wives, and then this is supposed to be another one. So, Cat, Jesus fucking Christ, stop eating plastic. I swear.
Yeah.
I swear these guys have like pica or some shit. So. What was I saying? Right. So now we're finally returning back to that narrative.
Okay, I think I should start if nobody else has anything to say. No. Okay, I'll start on verse 3 about what?
Wait, just a second. There's a little argument in chat about whether Allah is a boy or a girl. And then, yes, and someone said, "How do you know? Have you seen his genitals?" And the person said, Allah has revealed himself to me.
That's hilarious.
I mean, I guess they didn't answer that
And he-
specifically to the person who asked about the
And he
Genesis,
followed
but,
that up
that's funny.
with "Don't tempt it." So I'm confused.
Oh.
How do you not? Okay. I'll start on verse 3 about Kilav. According to 1 Chronicles 3:1 and Josephus in Antiquity 7:21, his name was Daniel. Yeah. Traditional commentators attempted to reconcile between the two given names. Rabbi Yitzchak in Tanchuma Toldot 6 said that the scoffers in the generation asserted that Abigail had actually conceived from Nabal. Thus, God ordered the angel in charge of the formation of embryos to fashion that embryo in the likeness of his father. So
Wait,
that
what?
everyone... Yeah, listen.
They have angels for everything, man.
Yeah. So that everyone would be forced to acknowledge that David was his father. Yeah.
That
Thus-
is how genetics works. Yeah.
Yeah. Thus, Kilav means completely like his father, Kulo Av. Rabbi Yochanan in Talmud Barachot 4a wrote that he was called Kilav because he would embarrass Machlim Mephibosheth, the teacher or authority figure in matters of halacha. Yeah. Kimchi writes that he had two names, like many other biblical characters. Septuagint and 4Q Samuel A read Daluya. Several commentators like McCarter and Bar-Efrat prefer this reading and take the Masoretic text reading Kilav to be a scribal error, since the last three letters of Kilav, Lamed, Aleph, and Bet, are identical to the first three letters of the next word, Le'avigail. Anderson postulates that Kilav is a cognate of Caleb, since Abigail may have belonged to the tribe of Caleb. Yeah. On verse 5, about Eglah. Her name means calf. Eglah is described here as David's wife, which is strange given that the title is not given to his other wives. This led to some speculation regarding Eglah's true identity. Rav in Talmud Sanhedrin 21a took Eglah to be Michal because she was dear to David like a calf. Rabbi Yehuda Bar Simon in Genesis Rabbah 68:7 said that she was called Eglah because she lowed like a calf during the birth of her son and died.
That's wow.
Yeah.
That's dark.
Yeah, and it also contradicts what is told in 2 Samuel 6:22 that Michal did not bear a child until she died. Though Rav Chisda in Talmud Sanhedrin 21a said that until the day of her death she had no child, but on the day of her death she did have a child.
Good for her, I guess.
Yeah.
Better late than never.
Yeah. Kimchi, however, wrote that Eglah and Michal were not the same, but that Eglah was Saul's wife, who David took after Saul's death. Anderson notes Wellhausen's opinion that one would expect the name of Eglah's former husband, as in the case of Abigail, the wife of Nabal, in verse 3. Smith has suggested reading Achot, sister, i.e. half-sister, instead of Eshet, wife, a reading which Anderson takes as unlikely since David is said to have two sisters, Tzeruiah and Abigail, in 1 Chronicles 2:16. Yeah. Now in verse 7, and Ishbosheth said to Abner. Hebrew Bible reads, and he said to Abner. The verb said, vayomer, has no explicit subject. While Targum preserves the Masoretic text, Vulgate and Peshitta add Ishbosheth's name, a reading favored by Kimchi and modern commentators. However, the Septuagint, at least the Vaticanus and Lucanic Recension, read Mephibosheth, who was Jonathan's son, according to verse 4:4. McCarter takes this reading to be the original and writes that it was suppressed from the Masoretic text in error. I think the confusion between Ishbosheth and Mephibosheth appears a lot in the versions, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I know how that name is spelled, but that's not how I'm hearing it.
How are you hearing it, Aaron?
East bullshit.
Yeah. Okay, so on verse 7, why have you lain with my father's concubine? Bar-Efrat writes that taking the wife or concubine of the previous king indicates the inheritance of the claimant's rule, as seen when Absalom sleeps with his father's concubines in 1622, and when Solomon executes Adoniah for asking to take Abishag the Shunammite to be his wife, since she was David's attendant, in Hebrew sochenet. Anderson, however, writes that Abner's prostration of loyalty seems to exclude this interpretation. Moreover, Abner practically had the kingship, and so Ishbosheth's reprimand would scarcely deter Abner if the kingship over Israel was his aim. Although Ishbosheth accuses Abner of sleeping with Ritzpah, it is not told explicitly that he actually did. But Abravanel argues that he did sleep with her on the basis of verse 8, "This day you reproach me over a woman." The Lucian recension adds, "and Abner took her." McCarter attests to one Greek manuscript which reads, "and Abner went into her." He notes that several scholars, like Smith, have regarded such an addition as, quote, "a necessary preparation of Ishbaal's accusation of Abner," unquote. He writes, however, that the textual evidence suggests that the writer deliberately left the case ambiguous. I need to drink.
You know what? I think we all really need to drink.
Not beer.
Yeah, who's talking about beer? I'm talking about rum.
Definitely something stronger.
Just cash mine.
There you go.
Yep.
There you go. That's the good stuff.
Yep.
Okay. On verse 8, "Am I a dog's head on Judah's side?" Auld writes that there is no close parallel in the Hebrew Bible to a person's calling oneself a dog's head. He suggested that a dead dog's head is liable to be removed and played with as a makeshift ball.
Because that's what you do when you don't have television or phones or technology or games.
Yeah.
Well, the first footballs were pig bladders.
Yeah.
Yes.
Although I would say that that dogs are always like seen to be like bad, like, oh, they're filthy, they're gross, they're shitty, they're dogs, they fucking suck. So that was the prevailing view in biblical literature. Like, it's very insulting to be called a dog. Although it seems like there has been some suggestion that it may have originally just been like, am I a dog or am I a dog's head? Like, without the for Judah part.
Yeah.
So like what was the one that that Alter said?
I mean,
Wait,
I haven't finished the comment, but yeah.
oh, sorry.
Commentary. We should put that on a t-shirt.
Sure. Lawrence, wanted
See the
to.
danger noodle.
I was gonna let you finish your commentary.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Actually, I'm gonna deal with this
Sorry.
fucking cat. Oh my god.
Yeah, maybe you should. So Auld writes, "If so, then clearly Abner does not see himself as similarly expendable." End quote. He also notes Winton Thomas's interpretation, dog-headed or dog-faced baboon. I like it. Semachus translates Kainokephalos, which recalls the genus Cynocephalus, the dog-faced baboons of Africa and Arabia. Or at least C. Hamadrias, the sacred baboon of Egypt, which McCarter argued that it must have been known to the Israelites. Thus, quote, "If this interpretation is correct, Abner is complaining that he is being treated like an ape," end quote. Yeah, Aaron, we are apes. Tsumura notes J.M. Hutton's suggestion that head, quote-unquote, is a case of a semantic borrowing from Akkadian reshu, which means slave, and takes the phrase rosh kelev as an appositive, translating a slave, a dog. Tsumura, however, writes that this suggestion is a little far-fetched. The phrase "on Judah's side" is absent from the Septuagint. McCarter takes the phrase to be a gloss by a scribe who was puzzled by rosh kelev, and analyzed its meaning as the chief of Caleb, the tribe that controlled the Hebron area. Yeah. Just want to wait for Lawrence. Lawrence?
Yes.
Uh, I don't think you've heard this, but there is an interpretation which that this refers to baboons.
Baboons.
Yeah, like I've noted Semicus translates to kynokephalos, which is
Something,
resembles
yeah.
like cynocephalus, which is like dog-faced baboons of Africa.
Okay, well I know Kephalos means head, uh, but that's an interesting,
Dog-headed.
yeah, that's an interesting interpretation.
Yeah.
I feel like throughout biblical literature, you're not gonna really see that. So I press X to doubt.
Yeah. Okay, so on verses 9 through 10, McCarter writes that these words coming out of Abner's lips are surprising, quote unquote. This vow assumes knowledge of Yahweh's condemnation of Saul and of the choice of David as his successor. He suggested that these verses are, quote, secondarily interpolated, perhaps by the prophetic hand that fashioned the larger story, or by a still later Deuteronomistic editor, end quote. Tsumura, however, writes that Abner had heard about it, but probably had not particularly believed it, or decided that if the Lord would have David king, the Lord would crown him. On verse 12, whose land is it? Whose land is it? Anderson comments, it seems that at this point
Oh.
Abner made an... Sorry.
I just want to quickly say the Kynocephala are not baboons. They're I know there's a word for it, like human. If you went through like old bestiaries and stuff, you'd have like humans with the face in their chest and stuff like that. So the kind of Cephali are just they're like people with dog heads, from India and Africa.
Oh, you mean
Well,
like composite creatures or something?
Yeah, like sort of chimeras, and like people Europe believed that there were these different like human-like creatures for a long time. Like I think even Linnaeus, like he had like Homo troglodytes, which is he thought of it as being like a valid animal.
I think-
Homo troglodytes for Linnaeus was chimpanzees. And then
Okay, because he called chimpanzee,
and
but
for whatever reason, he classified orangutans as Homo nocturnus, which we now use for vampires.
Oh, that's great. Yes,
I
I
mean-
wonder. I feel like he's
Sorry.
taking words that the culture used to refer to these like almost mythical creatures and saying, "Oh, that must be this animal that they were talking about." So he's like made them into synonyms. Yeah.
But I think the point is because like I think Greeks called baboons cynocephalus because they had a horse-like head. That's the point.
Dog-like. But I don't know if that's strictly
No, he
true.
said no. Sorry. Yeah, dog-like. I mean,
Like
that's
if you
how
look up
Semicus
kind of
renders it.
Kefle, it comes up as a tribe of dog-headed men native to African India.
Yeah, but it also would.
And I think
I've
you
read
might
it-
have mistaken tribe as
No,
in
no.
genus. Yeah,
Never. No.
because genus is like an old word.
No,
You could
I
translate
didn't
it as
refer like
group
to
of people.
genus. No, I didn't refer to genus as this. I just said that like I've noted this from McCarter's commentary.
I'm saying that whatever you're quoting
genus
is
cynocephalus. Yeah, he says
There
genus
is no
cynocephalus.
genus of
Yeah,
that
I know,
name.
but yeah,
but
he's wrong
there is
there.
in. So I'm saying genus and tribe, a tribe of people, a genus of people.
Yeah, but
because genus just
yeah.
means family, right?
I think so, but again, from what I've read,
Yeah.
Greeks and Romans referred also to these.
They knew
as
about.
baboons.
You're saying they knew
Yeah.
about baboons.
Yeah,
and
but
used the
let-
word
I
for
thi-
that. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Let's not go into. Okay, so in verse
Okay.
12, whose land is it? Anderson comments, it seems that at this point Abner made an exploratory attempt to make a deal with David. He proposed a covenant or an agreement in return for securing Israel's allegiance to David. It is possible that the rhetorical question, to whom does the land really belong, is a later addition, suggesting that Abner is not committing a high treason, but is simply instrumental in helping to bring about the fulfillment of Yahweh's promise to David. In other words, the land already belongs to David because of the above oath. However, some scholars like Kirkpatrick and Kennedy have argued that the question stresses that it is Abner who is, quote, the de facto lord of the land, end quote, according to Herzberg. This is less likely because the decisive factor is Yahweh's oath in verse 9, not Abner's domination. On verse 14, Tsumura comments, "It is surprising to see Ishbosheth's involvement, since Abner is negotiating to eliminate him." Noth thinks that David's marriage to Michal in 1 Samuel 18 through 19 is a later tradition, and hence the present verse is secondary. Thus, it thinks that Ishbosheth here in verse 15 should be corrected to Abner, but there is no reason to reject the account of the early marriage. Ishbosheth's involvement would mean that even he recognized David's connection with the house of Saul. As David had paid the bride price, he could not refuse to return his wife to him. Note that this is not violating the law in Deuteronomy 24 verses 1 through 4, for David did not divorce Michal. Mesopotamian laws permitted a husband who had been forced to leave the country to reclaim his former wife, even if she had become the wife of another man.
That's interesting that it was common enough that would happen, that they made a law around it. Was that law specifically cited in your source?
Let me check. I think maybe it was from ANET, but I need to check. He quotes from Zed Ben Barak, the legal background to the restoration of Michal to David in studies on blah blah blah. Okay.
I'll have to look into that. That's interesting.
Yeah. On verse 16, her husband went with her, weeping behind. Rashi wrote that Paltiel was crying, quote, over the good deed about to be leaving him, because all those years he thrust the sword into the bed, separating between him and her, and he did not stumble into sinful intimacy with her.
I hate stumbling into intimacy, when you trip and...
Yeah. He wasn't really crying because he was sad.
He's claiming that even though Saul gave Michal as a wife to him, he didn't agree and thought that it was still David's wife, so he never slept with her, and he would put a sword in the bed between them, like that one.
Yeah. On verse 18, I will rescue my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of all enemies. McCarter notes that the majority of commentators see part of verses 17 through 18, or at least verse 18b, to be secondary, probably a Deuteronomistic expansion. He writes that the language of verse 18b is similar to statements made about Saul in the prophetic account of his anointing, as we see in 1 Samuel 9:16 and 10:1. Tsumura, however, writes that the designation of king as the servant, quote-unquote, of his god was widespread in the ancient Near East, so it cannot be regarded as distinctively Deuteronomistic. That's it from a Commentaries part.
Okay. Any comments on that? Are we wanting to move on?
We still have like half the chapter left.
This chapter, yes.
Okay.
All right, picking up on verse 20.
Okay.
When Abner, accompanied by 20 men, came to David in Hebron, David prepared a banquet for Abner and the men who were with him. Abner said to David, let me leave so that I may go and gather all Israel to my lord the king, so that they may make an agreement with you. Then you will rule over all you desire. So David sent Abner away, and he left in peace. Now David's soldiers and Joab were coming back from a raid, bringing a great deal of plunder with them. Abner was no longer with David in Hebron, for David had sent him away, and he had left in peace. When Joab and all the army that was with him arrived, Joab was told, Abner, the son of Ner, came to the king. He sent him away, and he left in peace. So Joab went to the king and said, what have you done? Abner has come to you? Why would you send him away? Now he's gone on his way. You know Abner, the son of Ner. Surely he came here to spy on you and to determine when you leave and when you return, and to discover everything that you are doing. Then Joab left David and sent messengers after Abner. They brought him back from the well of Sirah, but David was not aware of it. When Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside at the gate as if to speak privately with him. Joab then stabbed him in the abdomen and killed him, avenging the shed blood of his brother Asahel. When David later heard about this, he said, I and my kingdom are forever innocent before the Lord of the shed blood of Abner, son of Ner. May his blood whirl over the head of Joab and the entire house of his father. May the males of Joab's house never cease to have someone with a running sore or a skin disease, or one who works out the spindle, or one who falls by the sword, or one who lacks food. So Joab and his brother Abishai killed Abner because he had killed their brother Asahel in Gibeon during the battle. David instructed Joab and all the people who were with him, tear your clothes, put on sackcloth, lament before Abner. Now King David followed behind the funeral bier. So they buried Abner in Hebron. The king cried loudly over Abner's grave, and all the people wept too. The king chanted the following lament for Abner. Should Abner have died like a fool? Your hands were not bound, and your feet were not put into irons. You fell the way one falls before criminals. All the people wept over him again. Then all the people came and encouraged David to eat food while it was still day. But David took an oath, saying, God will punish me severely if I taste bread or anything whatsoever before the sun sets. All the people noticed this, and it pleased them. In fact, everything the king did pleased all the people. All the people and all Israel realized that the day that the killing of Abner, son of Ner, was not done at the king's instigation. Then the king said to his servants, do you not realize that a great leader has fallen this day in Israel? Today I am weak, even though I am anointed as king. These men, the sons of Zeruiah, are too much for me to bear. May the Lord punish appropriately the one who has done this evil thing.
So there are a couple things I want to know. First of all, like the irony, like between thinking that he was going in as a spy, and then in the lament he's like, he died as a fool died. So like you have this parallelism between his potential cunning and his potential idiocy. But furthermore, I want to point out this this might have some, because it says here the king lamented for Abner. So I'm not sure if this has like any exact parallels in like the Psalms or anything like that. But yeah, so should Abner die as a fool dies, your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. As one falls before the wicked, you have fallen. So falling before the wicked being like, I mean, at least in a psalmic context, I know it's not quite that, but in a context like that, I could kind of see like, these are you died because of the stupid choices you made, basically. Like you just lost, you just took an L. And the interesting thing here is the word here for fool naval?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the word for wicked there?
Where was it? Is it
Wicked? Where?
In verse 34, as one falls before the wicked.
Oh,
Allah?
Bnei
treacherous man.
Avla.
Allah?
Oh, okay,
Avla.
okay. So
Sons of treachery or something.
gotcha. Okay, so it's not. I don't think that's the word. I think the word that's used in Psalms is Reshaim, right?
Reshaim, I think so.
Yeah. So okay. Then not quite the parallel I thought it was, but yeah. Still though, it is interesting. Like you just took the L. And this idea of they kind of love doing this, right? Like the spy motif. Like even though he's like like he's treated as if he were basically a spy, right? That he came to deceive you and to learn your comings and goings, to learn all that you're doing. They really are a fan of this.
It's almost as if it's like a huge innovation to have spies.
Right,
in
yeah.
military warfare. Yeah.
Okay, I think I should start first on verses 24 to 25. Anderson comments, "It seems somewhat strange that David apparently did not reply to Joab's complaint, and that neither Joab nor his informant seemed to be fully aware of the real purpose of Abner's meeting with David. One may also note that Joab accused Abner of treachery, and that he did not charge David with the failure to avenge Asahel, unless this is implied in Joab's words. However, it is likely that Asahel's death did not give rise to a legitimate blood revenge. Had there existed such a blood feud, Abner would have been less trusting, unless he felt that he was under David's protection, especially if there was a covenant between David and Abner." On verse 26, the cistern at Sirah, in Hebrew, Bo Hasirah. Although most commentators take it to be a place name, Chazal in Talmud Sanhedrin 49a taught that a well and a thorn, Sirah, caused Abner to be killed by not grasping unto the deeds of David, by ignoring the jug of water that David took from Saul in 1 Samuel 26:12, and by ignoring the corner of Saul's garment. Abner dismissed this, saying, quote, "Perhaps one of the thorns caught upon the garment and tore it," end quote. Tsumura identifies the cistern at Sirah with Siret El Bela, an oasis about 2.5 miles or 4 kilometers north of Hebron. Yeah. On verse 27, as if to speak with him privately. Hebrew for privately is basheli. The word sheli is a hapax. Traditional commentators generally take sheli to mean by mistake, i.e. Abner had mistakenly not been careful of Joab's desire to kill him. Some, like Kara and Kimchi, derived sheli from the root nun shin lamed, to remove or drop off, and wrote that Joab asked Abner, quote, "A yevama without an arm, gidemet, how does she perform chalitza?" End quote. Genesis Rabbah 81:2. When
So
Abner,
that's
wait, hold on. When
we should
Abner
explain
showed him
that.
when Abner showed him that she is performing a chalitza with her teeth, he struck him down. Yeah.
Sorry, what is a halitza? What is a?
So that's the woman who in the Levirate marriage who's being refused to be married.
Gotcha.
So she's the one who goes and unties his shoe and spits on the floor.
Gotcha.
So she's called the Khalisa, which is I think it means the untier, the one who unties his shoe.
Okay.
So he's saying, how does she do that act when she has no arms?
Yeah.
So he's like, oh.
See, now it's funny.
Yeah. Targum reads privately, and Peshitta reads in secret. This meaning is favored by most commentators. Septuagint reads ambushing him, and Vulgate to speak to him treacherously. Yeah. On verse 29, who leans on a crutch. In Hebrew, machazik bapelech, literally holder of the pelech. The word pelech is sometimes understood to mean spindle, according to BDB Dictionary, Hallott, and Anderson. Van Staldijn Solman notes that the spindle was a symbol of femininity, according to Sanhedrin 95a and Ketuvot. Oh my god. Ketuvot.
Yeah, it's like, the work, only being able to.
Yeah.
do
Sorry, I
women's
just
work.
forgot.
It was primarily women who would be doing
No.
that.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Just forgot the name of the tractate. I have it in abbreviation. It Ketuvot.
Yes, if you
72b.
cursed a man to hold a spindle, it means, you're only good enough to do women's work. That's.
Yeah, since spirit whirling was a woman's work in the ancient Near East. She notes that the curse has been explained in terms of cowardice or poverty. Quote, cowardice is mentioned in Yerushalmi Kiddushin 1:7 when the curse is connected with King Joash, who was conquered by a small army. Therefore, he and his men must have been as feeble-minded as women, 2 Chronicles 24:24. Poverty is mentioned in Tanchuma Bover Bereshit 6:7, which states that a man who needs to spin must have fallen to poverty because his wife could not keep her house, compared to Proverbs 31:19. Yeah.
So I didn't catch the last bit. What did you say? Because his wife.
Poverty because his wife could not keep her house.
Oh.
End quote. And thus, Targum follows the poverty interpretation, which reads, one who seizes wages, end quote. Septuagint, Vulgate, and most traditional and modern commentators take pelech to mean staff or crutch. McCarter notes the Phoenician pelekim, or pelkem, which means crutches, although Tsumura writes that it can also mean spindle. Peshito reads, carrying a begging bowl. Yeah. On verse 30, Bar-Efrat notes that there are several issues with this verse. Quote, there is a repetition of the explanation already told in verse 27, according to which Abner was killed in revenge for killing Asahel. Only here the important word in battle was added. Abishai, Joab's brother, is also mentioned to be Abner's killer, even though in verse 27, Abner was killed by Joab alone. Segal speculates that Abishai, quote, participated in Joab's act by advising and helping him, end quote. The use of the letter lamed instead of et to indicate the subject of hargu, killed, while found in biblical Hebrew in 1 Samuel 23:10, it is unusual, excluding a later text in Job 5:2, end quote. Septuagint has had been laying for instead of kill, explaining that Joab and Abishai lay in wait for Abner and waited for the chance to avenge Asahel. While McCarter favors this reading, Anderson writes that this may have been a later attempt to reconcile verse 30 with verse 27. He notes that most commentators take verse 30 to be a later gloss to explain the negative attitude in verse 39 to the sons of Zeruiah. On verse 33, should Abner have died as the lawless die? Hebrew for lawless is naval. Although naval here is generally taken to mean lawless or fool, Septuagint takes naval to be the person Naval, and renders, shall Abner die according to the death of Nabal? Auld writes that Septuagint portrays Nabal as the archetypal fool. Yeah. On verse 34, your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. 4Q Samuel A adds in chains, besekim, after the first clause. Several commentators like McCarter, Anderson, and Friedman prefer this reading since it improves the parallelism of the Masoretic text, which appears metrically unbalanced. Tsumura, however, notes that one can read the lines like BHS does, quote, your hands were not bound and your feet, they were not put in fetters, end quote. He takes your hand were not bound and your feet to be an example of, quote, interrupted coordination, end quote. Auld notes DJD, or Discoveries of the Judean Desert, preferred reconstruction of the original couplet, your hands bound by no manacles, your feet not locked in bronze fetters. On verse 35, they all came and urged David to eat something. The word translated to eat is lehavrot, from the root beit resh hey, to eat, as we see in BDB Dictionary. Rava in Talmud Sanhedrin 20a attests to a kerei reading, lehavrot, and a ketiv reading, lehachrot, i.e. chaf instead of bet, meaning, quote, in the beginning they waited to destroy him, and ultimately they decided to comfort him, end quote. Kimchi notes that several philologists, like Menachem ben Saruk, Judah Chayuch, and Joseph Kimchi, his father, attest to his Kerei and Ketiv reading, but he writes that he couldn't find any Hebrew manuscripts which include this tradition. He also notes that the philologist Ibn Janach could not find this reading as well. Besides McCarter, no other commentator notes this Kerei Ketiv tradition, and I also did not find any tradition like this. Yeah. And finally, on verse 39, Anderson writes that David's explanation for not punishing Abner's murder is lame, but not improbable, end quote.
This is lame. That's funny.
This whole story comes across as propaganda to say that David didn't kill Abner, sort of thing. Like, oh, it wasn't me, it was
Well,
Joab. And why did he do it? Because of this thing that happened once when
thing
they
is not
were
just
fighting,
yeah, not just that, not his fault, but he is because this is specifically about like what guilt, right? Blood guilt. So the this idea of a core personality where you have someone being the representative of the whole is like he has to take that blame off of him, otherwise everyone else in the community would suffer for it.
Yeah, it's almost like in the story itself, the people were suspicious, and then when he was like mourning and he didn't want to eat, the people were like, "Oh, this," they approved of him, and then they approved, so they like all of their suspicion went away, and it's like, I don't know, it's interesting to have a propaganda.
So I continue. Anderson writes that there may be an implicit future aspect, that one day David or his house will be strong enough to act. He further writes, quote, Otto Thenius once noted that it is very surprising that David should openly confess his own weakness and fear of Joab and Abishai. Yet this may be a possible explanation as to why David as king and judge failed to punish Joab. Alternatively, one could argue that in some way or another, Joab's deed had some justification. His brother's blood had been shed and the killer was known. Even at a later time, a manslayer could be killed by the avenger of blood if he did not reach the city of refuge in time. See Deuteronomy 19:6. Only after David's death was Joab's deed interpreted, maybe for political reasons, as crime worthy of death. And that's it from a commentary. But Christians, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nestorius writes that the weakening of Saul's house and the strengthening of David's is appropriated as a declaration of the decline of heretical teaching and the advance of correct teaching.
Which is appropriated by what?
The weakening of Saul's house and the strengthening of David's.
So he's saying that this story is an appropriation of an idea. I don't know. It's
yeah,
language.
He specifically refers to the Manichaean sympathizers. Yeah. Yeah. And Salvian the Presbyter, he writes that the case is like the shift in power between Saul and David, God's judgment is evidenced in the flourishing of the barbaric quote-unquote Goths and Vandals and the demise of quote-unquote faithful Catholics.
What?
Yeah.
Wait, the demise of Catholics and the rise of the Goths is God punishment?
Judgment, not punishment.
Judgment, whatever.
Yeah.
It's incredible how much of these ancient Christian commentaries are always just theological interpretations or recontextualizing of everything they read in the Old Testament. Hardly any actual critical commentary or anything of the sort. Like anything that could actually be useful to us, it's not.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I've read some that were decent, but I've kept the most of the like bizarre ones because it's funny.
Also, I think the Goths and Vandals converted to Christianity pretty early on. So,
yeah.
Also, if you guys want to learn about Nestorius, I did a video about the Council of Ephesus where he was condemned.
oh,
Yeah, it was a heretic. Historianism. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't even like that big of a fucking deal, honestly. Like
he's the guy who started this. Yeah.
The big issue for him was well, maybe we should stop calling Mary the mother of God because like she gave birth to Jesus. We just call him like the mother of Christ, not mother of God. And they were like, "Oh my God, you're awful."
I mean, he also said that there were two persons, like two Jesuses, one divine, one human, right?
No, I
Is
don't
it?
think so.
Oh, is it?
Was it?
Yeah, no, that was somebody else. So the I'm pretty sure the big issue with Nestorianism was, they did like relate it to the personhood of, to the divinity of Jesus, obviously, because like, oh well, if Jesus is God, then yeah, totally, she gave birth to God. But then you get to the weird thing of God having a mother. So he was just like, maybe we should just like use different words for this, and everyone lost their shit. But it was mostly because Jerome translated everything into Latin so poorly that they weren't like fully getting the point. And yeah, it's stupid. In fact, there's a really good book that I read. I reference it often. It's called Christ and Christian Tradition. It's basically like the history of Christology in the early church, and it's really, really fucking good. It's from LeYisra'el. And the first volume has like this section at the end about Nestorius and Nestorianism. And he's like, should this really be considered a heresy? Like because like he did like the study of it, and he was like, I don't know, guys. So
And then and then they made him a heretic.
I don't actually know, but that would be pretty funny. But yeah, it's the theological debate is super interesting, I think.
Which
Lawrence-
Who is it?
Heretic is the name of my new Python.
Oh, that's good.
Lawrence,
Yeah,
I linked to that video in the chat.
Oh, thank you, appreciate it.
No. My new Python. I have a tiny baby, 30 inches long, an albino lavender, and on the back of his head, he's got a question mark. So had to name him Heretic.
Oh, you could have called him Epicurus.
Actually, that's pretty good. That is actually pretty good. That's so much better than Enigma, which is like everybody's suggestion.
Or Thomas.
So Lawrence, which group or heretic said something like Jesus was a human, fully human, and then like the spirit came into him and like what's the word? Like took over the body. What's that?
Yeah, I forget the name of it, but I know which one you're talking about. Yeah, the thing is in the early church, it may have been Apollinarius, may have been Apollinarianism. I don't quite remember all the names for the groups and all their distinct theologies, because it does get kind of like
there's a difference between Jesus the man and like the Holy Spirit
and like was he imbued with the Holy Spirit? Was he born as a man and then imbued with the Holy Spirit, or like with this divinity, like with the Logos, or was it something else? Like there were tons of debates about this stuff.
She had like Shippocetheus debates about whether like it's the same person.
Right. Yeah. No, that's essentially what it is.
Yeah.
So are we done with this chapter and the
I'm
commentary thereof?
Yeah.
Okay. Not wanting to move on to the next chapter, right?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good time to finish.
Yeah. All right. Then.
I'm sure Aaron has a snake appreciation day to get to.
Of sorts. Slightly different, but yeah. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
I'll see you. Make sure to
and
watch
Discord. Lawrence's video on whether the Earth is flat. That it really is. He did really good work.
Not on whether the Earth is flat. That was not in question. Let's be very clear here. Whether or not the biblical Earth is flat.
Yeah, whether the Bible authors thought that the world was flat, as they evidently did.
And it's not just about that. He talks about a lot of cool other stuff as well. Like he talks even about like Ezekiel's vision and the angels and stuff like that. It's good stuff.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting ancient Near Eastern parallels to their imagery. Shocker. But it's there's a lot of, I think, really cool stuff that I mentioned in there. But yeah, otherwise join the Discord.
Right.
Yes. See you in the Discord. Bye.
I linked Fleur for Lawrence in the chat too.
Hey, check it out, Lauren.
Yes.